Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto acid bloodline. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Yasui Ki had a pretty good life. She was a 19-year-old kunoichi of Konohagakure. She had been a chunin for 3 years and had arrived at the pivotal time in her life where she could decide. Take the risky path of the jonin or stay the relaxed life of a chunin. She had 2 loving parents. Her father was a carpenter and her mother, an herbalist. Yasui was also engaged to the love of her life. He happened to be a shinobi as well and went by the name of Hiko Shikan. She and her fiancé lived together in a standard 2-person apartment and were going to be married in 8 months. Overall a simple but rewarding life. An earth-shattering explosion rocked the room, nearly sending Hiko and Yasui tumbling to the floor. "What the hell?" shouted a newly awoken Yasui, almost smacking her fiancé in the face as she flailed her arms in surprise. Despite the utter shock, they both righted themselves and ran to the window. Off in the distance, a massive beast stood in the middle of the moonlit village. The visage of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the great 9-tailed fox, rending the earth and buildings around it, terrified the couple to their very souls. Both ninjas paled. "God," Hiko gasped as they both stood rooted in place. Then the Kyuubi reared its head and roared, rattling the windows of their home. This shockwave broke them both out of their stupor. "That looks like it's near our parents' homes. We've got to go help," the kunoichi exclaimed. Dressing quickly into their ninja gear, they ran out of their apartment and towards a residential district in the direction of the Kyuubi. As they ran along the rooftops, they could hear the screams of the people in the streets. Steeling their resolve, they pressed onwards closer towards their first destination. After 2 minutes they reached Hiko's father's house. "Father," Hiko barged into the home. "Father, we have to get you out of here." "What the hell is going on?" came a voice from down the hall. Yasui was starting to panic. "My parents' house is closer to the Kyuubi. We have to go. Hurry, get out here," she shouted. "All right, I'm coming." All 3 left the house and saw a stream of people running down the street. On the road, there were a few genin directing the flow. "Listen to those genin, father, they will take you to the bunkers. We have to go help get others out." After Mr. Shikan left with the others, the 2 chunin took off towards the Ki household. From a distance, the block that Yasui knew her parents' house was on, looked to be on fire. And it sounded like there were some people trapped inside their homes, screaming their lungs out for help. What was worse, the Ki household appeared to be completely engulfed in flames. "No!" screamed Yasui. Hiko went through some hand seals and yelled, "Water release, exploding wave." Sadly, neither ninja had been very proficient in water release, and the resulting wave was not enough to even put out the flames that were around the front door. Another earthquake shook the area, and this one was so violent that both Hiko and Yasui were hard-pressed to not fall flat on their backs. The home creaked and groaned, and before they could react the roof collapsed and created a cascade of debris that knocked down most of the inflamed building. The pair had to shield their faces as the dust cloud overtook them. When they could see again, the fire that had briefly died down almost immediately exploded out again, hungrily eating into the home. Yasui had never seen true war and loss, and at that moment she couldn't comprehend life without her 2 loving parents. "No!" she screamed in agony. "Yasui!" Hiko wrapped his hands around her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "I'm sorry. We were too late. But we have to go help the village drive this thing out. We need to leave." Yasui's ninja training kicked in and she set her visage as best she could. They quickly approached a still-standing building, and both jumped to the roof. Looking about, they could see the village was no longer blue from the glow of the moon, but a deep orange from the fires that burned within it. The devastation was nothing either of them had seen before, and if not for the soot that burned at their eyes and the ground that shook beneath their feet, one might have believed this was all a dream. Despite the smoke and debris in the air, they were able to spot a group of ninjas that appeared to be coordinating long-range attacks on the Kyuubi. The rooftop that the group had chosen was on a 5-story building a few streets away from the enormous right leg of the beast. It seemed too close for either Hiko or Yasui's liking, but it was not their decision to make, so they made haste to join the group. After hopping onto the roof, they approached the only apparent Anbu member of the group. "Reporting," Yasui shouted above the noise, a slight wobble in her voice. The bare-masked ninja didn't even turn to face them. "When I tell you to, Send your strongest long-range jutsu at the midsection of the Kyuubi. Hi! Chorused the entire group. Unfortunately for them, the towering monstrosity had other plans. Without even shifting its weight, two of the tails came soaring forward and began to descend upon them. As quickly as possible the ninjas dispersed as the rooftop was obliterated. As Yasui dodged a sure death, she saw her partner's body tumble onto a nearby street. Once on the ground she avoided falling debris and quickly jumped to find Hiko, but what Yasui saw when the dust cleared completely broke her. Hiko's descent had been followed by a wooden beam, and it was now impaling him through the chest. He lay face up on the street with a vacant stare, and blood was pooling around his body. The Chunin could not take any more and fell to her knees beside him. Sobbing, she wrapped her arms around his chest and slowly rocked back and forth. The world was lost to her. Nothing else mattered anymore. The days marched on unknowing and uncaring of the tragedy that had befallen Konohagakure. The residents had no idea how the nine-tailed fox had shown up in their village, but those that survived did their best to rebuild their homes and hearts. Rumors began to circulate that the fox had been defeated by the Yondaime Hokage, turning it into a small child. It was said that the child had whiskers on its cheek, just like a fox. Over the years, the Hokage attempted to befriend the little blonde boy, visiting him at the orphanage and taking him out to the park or to eat. The boy seemed receptive of the friendship, but as he grew older he began to ask questions that the Hokage was not willing to answer. This seemed to create a rift between the two, and Naruto seemed to get more upset rather than excited each time the Hokage visited. Eventually the duties of his title became all-encompassing and the aged Hokage was reduced to using this Anbu to regularly check up on the boy. He regretted it, but it was the best he could do for the time being. We have agents in place to monitor him and ensure there is no interference. A figure droned. An eye peered at the kneeling form. Good. Remain discreet. When possible limit his bonding, we need him malleable. A small 7-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, whiskered-marked boy wandered around the poorer districts of Konoha. It had been a full year since he was thrown out of the orphanage, and he had been living on the street ever since. Stealing what he had to, he lived a difficult life of a street urchin. It was a hard, but that was the only option Naruto now, as the grandpa-like figure of the Hokage hadn't visited him in at least 2 years. He had on a tattered gray shirt and small blue shorts. As he walked along, people would glare at him, sneer at him, and sometimes throw rotten food or rocks at his head. I don't get it, what did I do wrong? He questioned mentally. His stomach decided it was at that moment that it couldn't take it anymore and growled. Frowning, he looked around at the shops and restaurants. I'm really hungry. Then, he picked up a heavenly smell wafting his way. Looking over to his left, he noticed a small cart with what looked like pastries sitting on top in little stacks. They looked fresh if the steam rolling off them was any indication, and his stomach growled even louder as if calling out to the delicacies. Now normally Naruto would have been able to assess the situation a little better and come up with a plan of action to steal the pastry, but not eating for days overrode his logical thinking. Drooling slightly, he made his way over to the cart and turned his head left and right to see if anyone was looking. Seeing no one he quickly grabbed one and ran off. Hey, that little monster stole one of my pastries! Shouted the angry cart owner as he gave chase. While Naruto ran, he turned around to see how close the cart owner was and was happy to observe that the man was fat and old. It was at that moment that he ran head first into someone. Yasuiki looked startled for a moment, then she looked down and realized who ran into her. This little rat had whiskers on his face, unmistakable. She glared daggers at the boy and attempted to grab him. The boy dodged and took off running again. Come back here, you cretin. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Mind rapidly churning through that mantra, he rounded another corner and dashed off. One would think that a Chunin would be able to easily catch and subdue a small 7-year-old boy, but Yasui had been discharged relatively soon after the Kyuubi incident. Ever since the loss of her fiancé and parents, it was deemed that she was not stable enough to be a ninja. These days she didn't really keep up with her cardio. As Naruto ran, he angled towards what looked like a large chain-link gate. Above the gate a sign with kanji for Training Ground 44 Forest of Death written on it. Unfortunately for Naruto, his reading was subpar. None of that mattered to Naruto at the moment though, as he rapidly approached his new escape route. Normally this gate would be closed, But at that moment a 14-year-old Anko Mitarashi was opening said gate to head home. She hadn't always lived in the forest, but ever since Orochimaru betrayed Konoha, she decided it was the safest place in Konoha for herself. The irony of that fact was not lost on her either. The Hokage had let her stay in a side building of the ground's central tower, as long as she kept it clean and in good repair. For Anko though, it just meant that she didn't have to deal with people bothering her at home, as they were too afraid of the forest to follow her inside. Quickly passing the kunoichi, Naruto ran into the huge forest. What the hell? Wondered a stunned Anko and was startled again when someone screamed behind her. Good. Go in there and die, you monster. Yasui then slowly turned around and appeared to be attempting to melt the ground with her gaze. I hope he dies impaled through the fucking chest, she swore mentally. Now Anko was furious. How dare she chase a kid into this forest? What the hell is wrong with this village? She hurried through the chain gate and then locked it on the other side and ran after the blonde-haired child. Cold and tired, that was how Naruto was feeling at that moment. His hunger forgotten, he was still running for his life, hoping to put as much distance between him and the angry woman that might still be behind him. Heart beating in his ears, he did not hear the shouts of Anko behind him. Gaki, wait, I'm not going to hurt you. Anko raced up behind him and went to grab his shoulder but missed, which resulted in Naruto losing his concentration and tripping on a root. Crashing head first into the ground, Naruto's world faded to black. Well, that could have gone better, I suppose. Guess I'll take him home and wait for him to wake up. Grabbing the unconscious lad and throwing him over her shoulder, she took off towards her house. The slow plink of water droplets echoed through the chamber. Naruto rubbed his head as he slowly rose to his feet and observed his surroundings. They threw me into a sewer, that's nice. Come here, boy, rumbled a deep voice off in the distance, making Naruto's eyes widen. What? Who's there? Looking around and seeing no one, Naruto timidly began to search for the source of the mysterious voice. Standing in knee-high water, he took note of the odd pipes lining the concrete walls. There were sets of pipes that seemed to be glowing blue, and others a soft tinge of red. Deciding to follow the peculiar-looking pipes, he sloshed through the water towards his unknown destination. A few minutes later, he saw what looked like massive cage bars looming off at the end of the hallway. Naruto slowly approached the bars, looked inside and was greeted by a pair of giant red eyes with black slit pupils. They loomed down on the now shaking boy. Ah yes, my jailer has finally come to greet me. The giant eyes narrowed and lowered down closer to ground level. And he's so small, even by human standards. Shame really, not much to do with you just yet. I'll just rest some more then. Who are you? The beast let loose a deep rumbling chuckle. A moment later its full set of fangs were brought to bear, glistening in the light. I am a terror to you pitiful beings known as humans. It spat out like the word was poison on its tongue. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The embodiment of hatred, the greatest of the tailed beasts. A monster so great that merely speaking my name invokes fear and despair in the hearts of puny mortals. Ellipsis quote. It was then a massive sigh was released from its mouth. And here I sit, in this damn cage. You could almost hear the gears in Naruto's mind beginning to turn. In fact, if you look to your left, you really do see some turning gears. Odd really. I wonder what those are for. I remember Gigi told me about the Kyuubi, but he said the Yandami killed it. You mean that you're not really dead? The beast growled. Do I look dead to you? No, clearly I'm not. I was locked inside of you. We're inside me right now? At that the beast scoffed. The gears continued turning. So, you're the reason that I'm hated? The looks and glares, that crazy lady that chased me, they all think you're me? In a way, yes. They believe that you are not the cage, but the beast within. Silly really, if I was you, I would not stand for those puny flesh bags glaring and throwing things at me. I would make them cower and beg before me. Showing its big pointed teeth, the Kyuubi grinned again. Naruto looked puzzled for a moment. Wait, there's a way to stop them from hurting me? From glaring at me? Of course. All you need to do is make them fear you. Make them realize any transgression will be punished severely. Force them to quake in terror when you pass by in the streets. At that, it paused for a moment. Once you learn to do that, maybe you will be worthy of a deal with me. A deal? Yes, a deal. But that is not important right now. It seems someone is trying to wake you up. I was getting sick of your idiotic questions anyways. The giant beast glared as Naruto faded from his mindscape. There you go. Welcome back to the land of the living. Staring down at the awakening boy, was a teenage girl with purple hair in a ponytail that was fanned out in the back. Her eyes were brown and quite pretty. She had on a brown trench coat, fishnet bodysuit, and a short leather skirt. Naruto stuttered out a response. Who are you? I am the super and single Anko Mitarashi. She exclaimed, grinning down at the boy. And you are? Naruto Uzumaki. Anko-san. Where are we? What happened to that crazy lady? At that Anko scowled. Stupid villager, she thought. Then she forced her expression to soften a bit. That's Anko-chan to you, cutie patootie. And we are currently in my living room, since I carried you to my house after you fell and knocked yourself out. And that lady didn't chase you after you ran in the forest. Anko rubbed her chin and shrugged. It makes sense really, none of those idiots would last 10 seconds in here. Observing his puzzled expression, she questioned him. You know, the Forest of Death? Ever heard of it? No, he said sheepishly, while scratching the back of his head. What are you talking about? You not see the sign? It's called the Forest of Death, and for good reason Gaki. You dumb or something? That insult roused Naruto out of his confusion enough for him to indignantly stick out his tongue, which surprisingly, or not, if you know Anko, she did in return. People are afraid of this forest. It's filled with all manner of creepy crawlies and huge beasties. There are even plants in here that will eat people. The people fear this forest, so they leave it alone. Naruto pondered for a moment, and the grinning visage of the Kyuubi invaded his mind for a moment. He then looked around the room. He observed that the space was a small living room, with tan walls, a few wooden chairs, a green couch, which he was currently on, and a small window on the far side of the room. There was a doorway that led to a small hall to his right. The ceiling was white, and the floor was wooden. All in all, a very cozy little room. You live here? He questioned. She chuckled briefly. Yup, home sweet home for Lil, ol me. Since the villagers don't happen to like me, either. I live here. Speaking of home, it's about time I take you back to yours, kiddo. Frowning, he replied. I have no home, ever since those mean orphanage ladies kicked me out a year ago. Ah, well then. That is a problem. Pondering their options, she came to a conclusion relatively easily. Well then, would you like to live here with me? Adding to the effect, she spread out her arms and stepped back to allow him to see the rest of the room he was in. But, don't expect to get a free ride. She smiled sadistically. You will be doing chores around the house every day. And, I don't want you to be a bum all your life, so you will be learning to become a ninja. Tears began welling in Naruto's eyes, and his shoulders began to shake. Concerned, Anko frowned. Oi, don't be like that, it will be difficult sure, and living with someone as totally awesome as me may make you feel inadequate, but you'll survive. Naruto giggled slightly. No, that's not it. It's just, he sniffed. No one has ever wanted me around before, I've always been alone. And, you are offering your home to me. Anko sighed, she was never good with kids, but she figured he could use a little support at this moment. So, she slowly wrapped him in a hug, allowing him to cry into her chest. After a few minutes, he cried himself back into dreamland, and she put him back down on the couch. Don't worry Gaki, I know what that feels like. It'll be okay. Waking up to a wondrous smell, Naruto groggily got up from his position on the couch. Where? Oh yeah, I'm in Anko's house. Slowly he made his way out of the room, and turning right at another doorway in the hall, he found himself in a small kitchen. This room, like the one he was in a moment ago, was relatively small, but contained all the necessary fixtures. With a white wallpaper and tile floor, it was somewhat austere but nice overall. Good morning. Anko smiled from her position in front of the stove. Morning, came the soft reply from Naruto. Noticing two places set at the table in the next room, he shuffled over and sat down. Hey, who told you that you could sit down? Wha? Came his intelligent reply. Anko snorted and took off her apron, with, pay the cook. Do I look like a charity to you? Written on it, and hung it on a hook on the wall. She turned and brought over the delicious-looking breakfast and gave him his portion. She took a moment to watch as he tore into the food like a hungry wolf into an unfortunate deer. His vigor while attacking the food made her consider just how hungry he was, because if she was being honest with herself, she wasn't much of a cook. He didn't seem to care, as he didn't even stop to breathe between bites. "You doing okay?" She smiled incredulously. He nodded vigorously but didn't stop shoving food into his face. "How about you slow down before you choke?" He didn't seem to hear her until she bopped him on the head. After waiting for him to calm down, she started eating her own food. Taking a bite out of some toast, she spoke between mouthfuls. "Alright Gaki, now today was special, consider this a one-time thing. I will not be cooking breakfast for you, probably ever again." Reaching over, she tapped a scroll that was sitting on the table. Naruto sent a perplexed look at her. "That is a scroll containing your duties around the house. Read through it and it will tell you all you need to know about keeping this house and the attached tower in working order." Smiling awkwardly at Anko, Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. I would, but no one has ever taught me how to read. I can puzzle together words most of the time, but other than that." Anko grimaced. "Really?" Naruto nodded, embarrassed. Anko closed her eyes and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Well, this is going to be interesting. You better be a fast learner because I don't have time to teach you every day, and now that I have to support you also, I will probably have to take on more missions too." Anko sighed and finished off the last piece of bacon on her plate. Grinning at the kid across the table, she gestured to her empty plate. Well, what? I said you would be doing chores, so one of your responsibilities will be to do the dishes." Naruto contemplated retorting, but just resigned to his fate, and after popping the last piece of egg into his mouth, he picked up their dishes and went over to the sink, beginning to wash them. "I've got an hour until I have to head to my super secret job. So, we will be using that time to start teaching you how to read. Hurry up and get those dishes done, and then come back into the living room and we'll start." Anko was surprised. Naruto knew more than he thought he did, and turned out to be an incredibly quick learner. They had just spent a little under an hour going over reading and he took to it like a fish to water. A few more days of help and he would be at an acceptable reading level for his age. "Okay Gaki, go through as much of that history scroll as you can, and when I get back later today, I will help you with what you are stuck on, and we will continue your reading and writing lessons." "K, thank you so much Anko-chan." The boy then wrapped the older girl in a tight hug, attempting to express his gratitude through squeezing her as hard as he could. She patted him on the head and smiled softly down at him. "Sure thing kid." With that she turned and opened the door and left him to his studying. Anko had just closed the gate to the forest and had turned around when an Anbu jumped down in front of her. "Anko Mitarashi, you are wanted by the Hokage as soon as possible. Please make your way towards his office." Not waiting for a reply, he jumped away towards other duties. I wonder what he wants. Jumping on top of a rooftop, she made her way to the Hokage tower. She entered the building and walked up the steps towards the Hokage's office. Knocking twice and hearing a muffled, "Enter," she stepped through the wooden door. "Ah, Ms. Mitarashi, thank you for coming," greeted the aged Hokage. He was sitting at his desk and had been conversing with a few jonin, which he waved away. Anko bowed slightly. "Hokage-sama," smiling at her, he replied. "So, I bet you're wondering why I brought you here." Seeing her nod, he continued. "Well, this meeting concerns a little blonde-haired child that ran into the forest of death yesterday. My Anbu reported that he was fine, but I want to hear from you. Is Naruto okay?" Again, she nodded. Good. Well, Anko, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for keeping him safe for the time being at least. If you have time, I wanted to explain a bit of the situation to you." "The situation?" she questioned. "Yes, as you probably know, Naruto Uzumaki is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. The beast was sealed by the Yondaime, who sacrificed his life for the sealing process." Sarutobi looked at the Chunin to make sure she was following along. Ever since that day, the villagers could not get past their loss and hatred to see a little boy for who he is, a hero. "Back when he was younger, I used to take him out to ramen and hang out with him, to at least show him not everyone hated him, but recently some events have caused my time to be entirely taken up. I cannot visit him as often as I would like, and fear that he is losing any connections he has to this village. He is under Anbu surveillance, but I would prefer friendlier faces keeping him company. This is where you come in." Sarutobi put his pipe into his mouth and lit it. Sucking in some smoke, his aged face smiled at her. "If you would be willing, I would be eternally grateful." Anko looked puzzled. "Sir? I am prepared to pay you the sum of an ongoing B-rank mission to take care of him, and teach him to become a ninja, so that he can eventually defend himself. He can start the academy next year, and with your help, he would be more than ready. I will help wherever I can, such as getting you materials for him. I would also add this assignment into your consideration for promotion if you accept this role. Mulling it over in her mind, she came upon her answer relatively easily. Well, Hokage-sama, I had already told him that he could stay with me, so I am more than willing to accept this mission. Smiling even wider, Sarutobi pointed to a storage scroll currently rolled up at the edge of his desk. That has your first payment, and some basic scrolls from the library for Naruto. They contain information on subjects such as the 5 great nations, different types of jutsu, and other material for a young budding shinobi. They are all written for young readers and as such contain simple language. I assume he doesn't know how to read yet. The Chunin flipped her hand back and forth, indicating, more or less. Very well, those scrolls will help him with the basics. Taking the scroll, Anko bowed towards the leader of the village. Thank you, Hokage-sama, I will not let you down. She then turned to leave and opened the door. I know you won't, thank you again, Anko. The Hokage smiled at her. I think this situation will help heal both of them. I'm home, yelled Anko. Looking down the hall, she noticed Naruto sitting on the couch, reading through the scroll she gave him. Hey, a squirt. She grinned as Naruto scowled at her. Guess what? What? The Hokage gave me some scrolls for you and said you could enter the academy in a year. And, he gave me some more money to help take care of your sorry behind. Hey! Naruto shouted indignantly at her. Wait, really? He did that for me? Yup. First things first, new clothes for you. Time to go shopping. Anko cheered and ran over, grabbing his hand, and performing a shunshin, appeared just outside the forest of death. Naruto felt dizzy and leaned over, putting his hands on his knees. Whoa, what the heck? A shunshin, one of the many abilities of a ninja. No, I won't explain it more, you're years away from it, squirt. The rest of the day was spent roaming around Konoha, looking for a new set of clothes for the lad. At first shop owners glared at the boy and attempted to refuse him service, but with some convincing from Anko, they caved. Eventually they settled on some black, short-sleeve shirts, with a few sets cargo pants and a pair of black boots. The clothes weren't exactly strong enough for a ninja, but it was cheaper, and Naruto wasn't a ninja just yet. Buying some training kunai and shuriken, they made their way over towards Anko's favorite dango shop for some lunch. Sitting down inside the shop, they made small talk while waiting for their food to arrive. Anko, you said that the villagers didn't like you either, but how come they don't try to attack you like they did me? Anko looked annoyed briefly at the sore subject but brushed it off. Well, Gaki, a couple of reasons actually. First off, I'm an amazing ninja, so I have the skills to fend off any attacks from the local idiots, and they know this. Secondly, I have a bit of a reputation around here, especially since I work in the T&I, so people don't like to mess with me. So, the gears continued to ratchet forward. They leave you alone, because you are strong, and because they fear you? Naruto asked. She paused for a moment. Yes, I guess you could say that. Little did she know, she had just further cemented what the Kyuubi had told the boy. It wasn't her intention, but she was changing Naruto forever. Over the course of the next few weeks, Naruto and Anko got acquainted with each other. They talked about their likes, dislikes, dreams, goals, etc. And figured out they had quite a bit in common. Finding a new kindred spirit in each other, they discovered the other's company usually quite enjoyable. Anko also found out that Naruto's learning ability was through the roof, as he had already finished learning how to read and write proficiently. After about a month, he'd also eaten through a good chunk of the storage scroll worth of material Anko brought from the Hokage. And, he had been doing virtually all the chores around the tower. The Kunoichi was currently on her way to the Hokage tower, to request a new scroll to give to Naruto when he finished his current one. Passing the secretary, she went up to the door and knocked twice. Sarutobi looked at the door for a moment. Enter. Anko walked in, surprising the Hokage. Hello, Hokage-sama. I came back to request new material for the whiskered one. He looked at her completely taken aback. You don't say? Well, that is good. Yes, that is very good. He is a very intelligent child. Very well. Rummaging around in his desk, he found the next storage scroll for Naruto. Tell me, Anko, how is he doing overall? Really well, sir. He is taking all of the information and absorbing it like a sponge. Not only that, but my house has never been cleaner. She then started to do a victory pose, then realized who she was in front of and sheepishly smiled and put her arms down. Ah, well yes, that's nice. And no more incidents with any villagers or unwanted guests? The Hokage always had Anbu tracking the Jinchuriki, but he liked to hear it from Anko as well. No sir. Naruto hasn't had to leave the tower yet besides a few shopping trips, and those wimps are too scared of the forest go inside, so he's all safe and cozy. Sarutobi smiled as he pictured Naruto and Anko snuggled in blankets by a fire, enjoying the quiet of the night. That's excellent, Anko. He extended his hand, holding out another large scroll. Here is the next set of material for the boy. He smiled as he handed her the scroll and stuck his pipe into his mouth. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Anko bowed and left the office. The sound of metal snapping against metal filled the clearing. Raise your elbow more, if you don't, I could just slide my kunai down yours and along your arm. Anko chided her student. If you're trying to block, you want to stop my momentum completely, otherwise you allow me to shift and continue my swing. Well yeah, but it would only be a scratch, and I heal pretty fast anyways. He retorted. The kunoichi stepped back. When fighting some opponents, a scratch can still kill you, Gaki. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Some people, such as yours truly, poison their blades. That way, all it takes is a nick and I can have you writhing on the floor in minutes. Naruto looked spellbound. Whoa, what do you mean? Quote, just think about what an animal needs to paralyze or kill prey or predators. Now imagine weaponizing those abilities. Harnessing venoms and poisons means that you can win almost any fight if you so much as nick the enemy. Looking at her student, she realized she may be getting carried away, especially if the drool coming out of his mouth was any indication. We can discuss more at a later date. Today we need to work on that ugly thing you call a stance. Now, again, she leapt at him and swung her kunai down at him, hoping to catch him off guard. Once more, the ring of metal filled the air. For the next 9 months it went pretty much the same. Naruto would read through the scrolls from the Hokage at an incredible rate, train with Anko on things such as chakra control and taijutsu, and do most of the chores around the tower. Not only that, but Naruto had managed to pester the girl enough to get her to reveal some of what she did at her job in the torture and interrogation. In fact, just about any time Naruto took interest in a subject, he could get Anko to cave and teach him about it. Perhaps she was experiencing the joys of teaching, or more likely it was the fact that she enjoyed the idea that she was creating a mini-me. Regardless of her reasoning, Naruto loved his burgeoning knowledge of poisons as well as how to mess with your opponent's mind. So Anko, can you give me a report of Naruto's overall progress? Hokage-sama, I have to say that the kid will make a truly astounding ninja. She thought for a moment. I believe he will lean towards being a medium, long-range shinobi. His taijutsu preference seems to be mostly about dodging and putting distance between him and his opponent. Chakra control has been something that I have been drilling into his head, and I can say that he is improving, but it is still below average. He is getting better at recognizing basic illusions and can dispel them when he does notice them. I believe his ninjutsu will be pretty powerful because of his chakra capacity. She tapped her chin briefly. The only jutsu I've let him practice so far is henge. I gave him a scroll on the henge a month ago and he was able to perform it within days. And, not only that, but he figured out the physical henge by himself. The Hokage looked impressed. Astounding, he took an E-rank technique and figured out the B-rank equivalent. That indicates an inherent knowledge of chakra manipulation way beyond his years. Can he perform both reliably? Anko shook her head negative. Not yet, Hokage-sama, but overall, I would put him at second-year academy student level. If only lacking the experience and teamwork aspects. She summarized. Impressive, Anko, I am very happy with his progress. His expression turned more serious. Now I've had some reports of Naruto scaring shop owners and some civilians. Care to explain? She looked incredulous. It is my professional opinion that those civilians are just overreacting. Basically, he just enjoys messing with their heads a little. Not a big deal, I would think. The Hokage considered her for a moment, then nodded. If you think he is okay, then I will take your word for it. After reviewing the effort put in by both student and teacher and noting that the academy would be starting in a couple months, the Hokage decided it was time to give them both a vacation and allow them to leave the village for 2 weeks to enjoy themselves. He would be sending agents along to monitor the village Jinchuriki, of course, but he had complete faith in his ninja. The acid is leaving the village for 2 weeks. Very well. Ensure his safety. Send squads 3 and 4. Hi. Hurry up and finish packing your stuff, Gaki, we're heading out in 10 minutes. Called Anko. I'm coming, sheesh, retorted Naruto from down the hall. After sealing all his clothes and other necessities into a scroll, he walked towards the front door where Anko was currently waiting. So where are we going anyways? We're heading northwest. There is a town along the way towards a megacure that is renowned for its bathhouses and other fun activities. We are going to be making the most out of this little vacation of ours. Heading out, they left the village behind and began walking towards their destination. They were able to make decent time, but for Anko it was painfully slow comparing her normal chunin speeds to that of an 8-year-old ninja in training. Ecstatic that they finally made it, she picked up her pace and practically ran away from Naruto. Finally made it, her retreating form shouted at her companion. Go check into the hotel called the Amari Inn, and I'm going to go find the nearest bathhouse and soak. Don't get into any trouble. Waving at him, Anko disappeared around a corner. Okay, I guess, leave the child to fend for himself. Naruto heckled in his mind. For the next week and a half, the pair lazed about. Anko spent a lot of her time either at bathhouses or walking around with Naruto visiting the various shops and restaurants. Both were thoroughly enjoying their time away from Konoha. Naruto coughed as he shakily got to his feet and realized he couldn't see at all. What the? Flashback. Naruto was currently walking by himself to head back to the hotel for the night. Enjoying looking around at the foreign faces that weren't glaring and sneering at him, he made his way through the streets. It was then that someone going the opposite direction bumped into him. Instead of apologizing or even acknowledging the contact, the figure kept walking. Well, excuse you. Naruto frowned to himself. Wait a second, Gama-chan. Checking his pocket, he realized that the person he just bumped into stole his gift from the Hokage, which held all his money. Whipping around, he spotted the perpetrator and took off in pursuit. The thief realized he had been spotted and broke into a run. After a few seconds he took a right into an alley. Giving chase, Naruto used his training and pumped chakra into his legs. Feeling that slight tingling in his muscles, he knew he could go even faster now, and ran up to the alley and darted down it. Coming up to an intersection with another alley, he swiveled his head around to find the thief. Where are you? Aha! Spotting the fleeing perpetrator, he ran off towards it. I know. I'll climb the walls and use the roofs to keep track of him. Nodding to himself, he ran towards the nearest wall and started to channel his chakra into his feet with the intent to jump up, off the wall, and onto the roof above. Unfortunately for Naruto, this particular section of the wall was a genjutsu, hiding a mysterious shaft that went straight into the ground. As soon as he jumped and put his foot against the wall, he went straight through it and plummeted towards the bottom of the hole. Flashback end. Oh yeah, well this is just great. He stole Gama-chan. He coughed briefly into his elbow. I wonder how long I've been out. Blindly groping around for some source of light, he bumped into a table and after a moment, managed to grab a candle from it. Using a minor Kaiden jutsu, he lit the candle and tried to make out his surroundings. From what he could tell, he was in some sort of underground house, probably a safe house of some kind. It had a few bedrooms, a washroom and what looked like a small study. Taking note that everything was slightly dusty, he concluded that whoever had been here last probably vacated several months ago, so he decided to take a look around. Naruto spotted a small book on one of the nightstands. What's this? Flipping open the book, he read the inside cover. Journal of Keshi Mayanaka. He flipped towards the end of the journal. October 5th. Something is happening to everyone. Ever since Hanzo was killed by that Pain character, people have started disappearing. Hanzo's friends, his family, people he did business with, they're all vanishing. I've got to get out of the country, so I'm taking Hisaki and Arai with me. Hopefully we'll be able to leave before we all disappear too. October 7th. I've convinced the academy teachers to release Hisaki and Arai for a short training period with me, so hopefully this won't arouse suspicion before we are long gone. I've also started collecting as many jutsu scrolls and supplies as I can. If we are going to be on the run, I want those kids to be able to defend themselves. Not to mention I've gotten a bit rusty over the years, merely being a caretaker of a couple of Hanzo's nephews. October 15th. We finally made it out of the country. I've been covering our tracks as best I could, but I'm still worried. Before we left, I heard that someone was able to take out Psychoro. If that's true, I'm not sure how much hope we have. That man was a spymaster. He was as slippery as a snake, and as tangible as a shadow. But apparently, they found his corpse a few days ago in one of Hanzo's estates. But I will not give up, if only for the kids' sakes. October 28th, we finally made it to the safe house. I think this is far enough into the fire country that not even Pain will be able to find us, so tomorrow I'm going to take the kids out and relax for a day. They have been real troopers, not even complaining during the long runs and short nights. After relaxing for a day, I think we can begin their training again. After that entry, the journal stopped. Guess I know what happened to them. Naruto thought grimly. Closing the journal and beginning to look around again, he took note of the jutsu scrolls on the tables. We wouldn't want all of these scrolls to go to waste, now would we? Maybe I can turn getting my wallet stolen into a positive thing. With that thought, he began to collect everything he could find and store them in his own scrolls. Among many of the intriguing items, he came upon a few sets of clothes that thoroughly fascinated him. They consisted of baggy camo jackets, with many pockets lining the inside and outside, along with a large hood. The pants were the same camo pattern and had the same style of pockets for things such as scrolls and kunai. But the most interesting aspect was a few full-face gas masks, with 2 round pieces of glass for the eyes, that were laying lined up next to a jacket. This is so cool. Naruto chuckled softly to himself. After finishing sealing up everything that he could find, he made his way back towards the ladder and out of the safe house. Where is he? Anko was pacing furiously around the room. It was now 5 a.m. and Naruto had yet to show up. She had periodically scoured the surrounding area but was worried she would miss him if he tried to get back in, and so at the moment she was back in the hotel. I swear if he got himself hurt I'm going to beat the crap out of him. She paused briefly, thinking on the strange sentence she had just uttered. Throwing her arms up in the air in frustration, she continued pacing. It was then there was a click at the door and it opened. She let the intruder open the door and then saw the object of her frustration walk in. Running over and hugging, flying tackle, him, she started to berate him. Don't you ever do that again. Where the hell were you? It's 5 in the morning. Fuck, I'm tired? What the hell, dude? Hold on, Anko-chan, I'll explain everything. Naruto tried to appease the angry Kunoichi. You better. So, he went on to tell about how he got his wallet stolen, the brief chase, and then finally landing into the safe house. Showing her the journal he picked up to corroborate his story, he let her read through it and went into the bathroom to clean up. Naruto exited the bathroom, wearing the gas mask, camo jacket and camo pants. Hey Anko, what do you think? Came a slightly muffled voice. Looking up from Keshi's journal she replied. Then she stifled a laugh. What are you wearing? He scowled behind his gas mask. Hey, I think it looks intimidating. And anyways, it will go great with my fighting style. Still grinning to keep from laughing at the boy, she chuckled. Okay, I think I get where you are going with that, but assume I don't. Explain. This was made for ninja, so it's way tougher than the pants and shirts that we bought earlier this year. I even tested it against a kunai and I couldn't cut it. And look at all these pockets. He opened and closed various pouches and pockets that seemed to line his entire form. I could carry so many kunai or sealing scrolls on me now. And not be able to get up from the weight. Anko laughed. No, I may be small for my age, but I'm getting stronger. Naruto retorted. Anyways, with this camo pattern, gesturing to himself, I will so much harder to spot. You've been teaching me the importance of being sneaky and I think this will work perfect for that. There are even other colors that I found. And finally, with this gas mask, pointing to his face, I can surround my enemies with poison clouds. I can sneak around while they deal with it, and I can take them out no problem. Anko nodded, her laughter sufficiently diffused. Okay, so maybe that will work for you. We'll see. She glanced at the clock on the nightstand. Well, it's time to hit the sack for both of us. I'm tired after looking for you all night. Get some sleep, Gaki. She flopped down on her bed. As he attempted to remove his clothing, which proved to be somewhat more challenging than he anticipated, where the hell did that zipper go? Oh, here it is. No wait, that's another pocket. Dang it. Naruto looked over to his companion. By the way, if you don't care, I'm going to train with the jutsu that Keshi dude left behind. They all sound pretty awesome. Sure. You found them, so they're yours now. The purple-haired girl replied, then turned her head to look at him, only to smirk at him as he fumbled around with his jacket. You, having some trouble there? No. See, I got it. As Naruto pulled a zipper down, the jacket opened slightly, but it was still connected around his neck. Anko propped herself up on her elbows and chuckled. No, I think that's just if you get hot and need some air in there. Try again. Damn it. After spending their remaining days relaxing, they finally headed back to Konoha. Oh boy, gate duty. Again, Katestu complained. Izumo glanced at his partner. Calm down, this is one of the most important duties. To protect the people of Konoha by making sure only those that are authorized can get through the gate. He spoke sagely. Yeah right, most boring mission we could have possibly taken. Katestu continued to grumble. Hey, is that someone off in the distance? Looks like it. Hey you two. Anko called to the two gatekeepers. Izumo recognized the voice and went over to the gatehouse to check off Anko and Naruto as back from their vacation. Hey Anko, hey, Naruto? Is that you? Yes, came the boy's muffled reply as his glass eyepieces glinted off the evening sun. That's cool. See you later then. As the two passed through the gate, Katestu whispered over. Well, that was interesting. I'm not sure whether I want to be impressed by his getup or creeped out. Me neither. We've still got the rest of the evening off, so go do whatever you want. I'm going to find Kurenai-chan and go get some dango. Running off, she left Naruto to his own devices. Thinking about what he wanted to do the rest of the night, he walked towards the market district. Time to test out a theory, he chuckled darkly to himself. As he walked past a group of adults, some which appeared to be struggling to maintain upright. Laughing to each other, one of them called out to him. Hey freak, what's with the, costume? One of them smacked the accuser on the arm. Dude, he could be a ninja. You can't just call hick people freaks. Nah, I don't see no headband. He's not a. To them it was as if Naruto disappeared. Within a fraction of a second he reappeared next to the drunkard with a kunai pointed at the man's throat. Did you know that all I have to do is scratch you with this kunai, and you will be writhing on the ground in agony? It's a special toxin that is highly corrosive to flesh, and it can burn a hole right through your arm. Naruto didn't actually have any poison on his blade, but the drunks didn't need to know that. Hey man, he didn't mean nothing by it. Right Haruya? Said one of the other men. The man was white as a ghost. Alright, good, Naruto eyes smiled at the man. Then I suggest you keep your mouth shut. At that Naruto walked off, feeling very badass and flipping his kunai in the air. I'm going to mark that off as a damn it. He reached down to pick up his kunai off the ground. As a resounding success. Heh. Maybe I'll head home and start looking through some of the new scrolls one picked up. Look at that weirdo over there. The grinning boy turned to see another group. Or, maybe I'll have some fun with more test subjects. The rest of Naruto's night was spent going around scaring random citizens. Each successful test just hammered further into Naruto's mind the utility of fear, and how much enjoyed using it. Deep in the recesses of his mind, the Kyuubi could feel the sadistic glee begin to grow within the boy. This was too perfect for the beast. The cruel pleasure Naruto got from his pranks increased as the Kyuubi used his influence and added a slight injection of yokai. After a while there weren't enough subjects roaming the streets, and so Naruto headed home. When he arrived within their home, he entered his room and took out his storage scrolls, laid them out of the floor of his room and released their contents. After putting away everything that he had before the trip, and hanging up his new camo outfits, he went back to the collection of scrolls. Looking them over, he observed a total of 15 scrolls that he had picked up. 10 of which were jutsu scrolls, 3 contained chakra control exercises, 1 was a scroll on the inner workings of the gas mask, and 1 scroll held an assortment of weapons. Deciding it would be smart to know what he was putting on his face and entrusting his life to, he picked up the scroll with information on the gas mask. Sitting on his bed, he began to read. Thank you for purchasing the Clear Air OT-23. This scroll contains the basics on how this model works, and how to maintain it. If you have any questions, please send your mail to blah, blah, blah. Here we go. The Clear Air OT23 is a full-face respirator that works on a dual-filter, single rebreather system. Guess it works underwater too. Cool. The filters use a 3-step method to make sure the air you breathe is clean and fresh. The primary defense is a simple particle filtration grate. This works to remove large particulates from the air, such as dust and spores. The second line of defense is a biomark absorption barrier that works to collect organic impurities. The final piece of the filter is a chemical reaction barrier. This will react with chemicals such as chlorine and will bond with them, preventing them from being carried into the lungs. With all 3 parts, this system, with one filter on each side of the face, will keep you breathing clean and fresh air for hours on end. The functionality is not reduced if one filter breaks down, but it is suggested that both be operational for maximum efficiency. The second part of the Clear Air OT23 is a rebreather. This is a common piece of equipment for any underwater endeavors, consisting of a simple, chakra-powered, water barrier. This machine works by using electrolysis to separate the oxygen from the hydrogen, venting the hydrogen out, and then delivers the pure oxygen through the mask. Maintenance. We have had our researchers working for many hours to provide you, the customer, with a good product that is easy to maintain. As most of our clients are ninja, we worked day and night to ensure this model could be used in the field for extended duration with minimal upkeep requirements. This device also comes with a small clasp that can be released to open a hatch located in front of the mouth. When open, it allows the wearer to eat while keeping the mask on, shaving off precious time between eating and being ready for active duty. Keeping the filters working. For the rest of the night, Naruto read through how to work his gas mask, how long between filter cleanings, and what to do if any part broke down. He went to bed happy with his progress and thinking over all the devious new things he could do with his new equipment. The infuriating sound of an alarm filled his room, followed by a loud smack and sweet silence. How I hate mornings. Naruto slowly pushed himself out of bed and stumbled towards the bathroom. Stepping inside the shower, he took off his clothes and, throwing them onto the bathroom floor, turned the water on. After 10 minutes of washing, he stepped back out, squeaky clean, and proceeded to brush his teeth. He then got dressed, slipped on his mask, tossed up his hood, and inspected himself in the mirror. Ooh, I love it. But, something is missing. Something to add to the effect. I've got it. Taking off his gas mask, he left the bathroom and went over to a small desk he had put in the living room, his bedroom. Picking up a brush and dipping it in ink, he painted the kanji for fear on the forehead of the mask. Perfect. Slipping it back on, he left his room and went down to the kitchen to grab a quick bite to eat. Briefly wondering where Anko was, he shrugged off the thought and started to boil some water. After making and eating his breakfast, he ambled back to the living room and picked up one of the chakra control exercise scrolls Anko had given him. Anko keeps bugging me about chakra control. I've already mastered the tree walking exercise, let's see what's next. After reading through the scroll, he nodded to himself and put it aside. Naruto checked himself over to make sure that he had everything he would need to survive a few hours in the Forest of Death. Now normally, one would think letting a pre-academy student loose into a forest known for giant human-eating centipedes and other deadly flora and fauna wouldn't be a smart idea. But having Anko as a tour guide helped Naruto immensely. He knew what regions to avoid if you didn't want to have to fight for your life, what areas contained game that a human could eat, and what parts of the forest had bodies of water. Even with all of that prior knowledge though, he also knew he always had to be prepared for anything and everything. This was a rule that his purple-haired friend often beat into his head, sometimes literally, with a rather large sign that had kanji for "be prepared at all times" written on it. Kunai, check. Shuriken, check. Senbon, check. Emergency supplies, check. Ration bar, check. Okay, I think that's everything. Heading out, he went south and, while avoiding the areas with the huge blood-sucking leeches, arrived at a small river that ran through the forest. Setting aside his jacket and pants and his extra pair of underwear, in case he slipped and gets soaked, he stepped up to the edge. He channeled the chakra into his feet and attempted to step onto the surface. Very quickly he realized that he was using way too much chakra and was just blowing the water away. The joys of huge chakra reserves, and fuzzy tenants, he thought to himself as he tried yet again to maintain the right level of chakra output. As the hours wore on, he got better but soon realized he had a long way to go. Around lunchtime he decided to collect his stuff and head back to work on some of his chores for the day. About halfway home, he accidentally alerted some rather large jumping spiders to his presence. Looking up into the canopy, he saw 4 spiders looking down at him with black beady eyes. Each was a shade of ebony with white hair on their legs. 2 had large green mandibles, while the other 2 had red. Their quarter-foot-long fangs were dripping in venom, as if the spiders were salivating at the prospect of eating the boy. I've never seen this type of spider before, he thought. Maybe I can extract their venom and use it to start my own stash. Making sure he had packed the vials he borrowed from Anko, he got into a ready stance. The first spider jumped down at him from his right side. Hopping backward, he waited for it to land and then dove forward at the spider's exposed side with a kunai in each hand. He sliced off a few legs at the joint with one kunai and impaled its head with the kunai in his other hand. 2 more spiders jumped down from their positions, coming in at his back and front at the same time. Jumping up and to the right, he kicked one spider in its eye, while using his momentum to carry him to a nearby tree. Sticking to its side, he ran up the tree. The last spider decided it was then that it wanted to join the fray. Naruto was expecting this, however, and performed a back flip over the flying spider, while impaling its head with a kunai. Still mid-air, he threw 2 shuriken at each remaining spider, hitting them in the eyes and abdomen, killing both. Naruto landed on the ground a little way away and walked towards the arachnid corpses. He then spent the next few minutes removing the venom glands from the spiders and putting the extracted liquid into the vials. After he was done, he decided head home and do his best to avoid any more of the local fauna. Greetings Anko-chan. Naruto waved from his position in the hall as he walked into the kitchen. I've got a question for you. What's up, little dude? I encountered some large jumping spiders on my way home. They were about the size of a small dog, black, outer shell? The word you are looking for is carapace. She corrected. Yeah, that. White hair, and green and red mandibles. Any idea what I'm talking about? The kunoichi cupped her chin in thought. I think so. Those things jump around like fleas? Naruto nodded and continued. Yeah, they did. Well, I collected some venom off them, and I wanted to know what it would do to a person. Oh, that stuff is great. She smiled evilly. The poison from the green ones works to paralyze, slowly making the body go numb and limp. As long as it has a way into the bloodstream or lungs, it will work its magic, though the time it takes to effect varies. The red one works to achieve the same goal, but through forcing the subject to sleep. Neither has any long-term effects on the body, since they just work to give the spider time to wrap up their victims. The masked kid stood there for a moment, mulling over what he had just collected. You said it could work if it got into the lungs, right? Like a gas of some sort? Anko nodded and his eyes gained a maniacal glint to them. The look died down, and he turned to the fridge to pull out some meat for a sandwich. By the way, I tried out water walking earlier. It was really tough, but I think it will help a lot. Heaven knows you need better control. She commented, smiling knowingly at him. Rolling his eyes, he retorted. I know. You won't teach me anything cool until I. He put up his fingers in air quotes. Master my chakra. So what were you up to? I was out hanging with Kurenai. We got to catch up some, since we hadn't seen each other lately. Well, I'm off to work for the rest of the day. Ya nay. And with a wave, she disappeared out the door. Over the next 2 months before entering the academy, he continued to read his various scrolls and do the chores around the house. Even though he wanted to dive straight into the ninjutsu he took from the presumably deceased Aim Nin, he listened to his friend's advice and focused primarily on his chakra control. To keep himself occupied, he also started to experiment with the venom he had collected. With assistance from Anko, he finally figured out how to get the spider venom into an aerosol form. Turns out that the whiskered ninja to-be was also particularly fond of tinkering. He spent some time adjusting the outfit that he had acquired by threading multiple tubes throughout them, connecting to canisters containing the gaseous venom. The tubes ended just behind the end of his sleeves, and in the future, he wanted to have ports all along his person, but that would come later. He had small quick-release clamps hidden on the tubing, allowing for rapid and discreet release of the fumes. After he checked to make sure the clamps worked, he went outside with Anko to test his new device. While Anko stood away, he released the clamps and sprayed a nearby target dummy with a veritable stream of sleeping gas. He then extended his arms and released another torrent of gas while he spun in a circle. This ensured he was completely enshrouded and, if all went well, his mask would filter out the aerosol and he wouldn't pass out. After a few tense seconds of waiting, Naruto ran out of the cloud and cheered. That was not the only modification he was working on. Having pockets to carry all his items was great, but he needed a way to quickly access a blade if the situation called for it. The device wasn't complete yet, but he was working to install hidden blades in his boots as well as his sleeves. The idea was that when retracted, they were stored inside their own vials filled with venom, so when extended, the liquid already coated the razor's sharp edges. His venom of choice was collected from an adder he had found recently on one of his excursions into the forest. After testing the venom on some unfortunate forest creatures, he found it to be particularly deadly. The most visible effect was local muscle paralysis and weakness thanks to the potent postsynaptic neurotoxins. Also contained within the venom was a fast-acting hemotoxin, which affects the clotting of blood. This means that within minutes the victim could bleed out, or if trauma is inflicted, internal hemorrhaging would lead to death. Finally, Naruto learned that the venom contained a powerful myotoxin, which will dissolve the muscles around the skeletal structure, resulting in loss of function within minutes. He was impressed. A drop of the venom could easily kill a full-grown man within minutes. Not to be careless, he began researching how to create anti-venoms and antidotes based on generic knowledge provided by the Konoha library. Having a pretty large supply of venom to test would help him create the necessary concoctions. While Anko knew about the sleeping and paralysis gas, she was unaware of the blades and the adder venom. Naruto kept it a secret as he knew that she would have to report it to the Hokage, and he probably wouldn't approve of the deadly attachments being utilized by a kid so young. On the topic of his chakra control, he had finally mastered the water walking exercise, and had recently moved on to one of the aim scrolls that he had picked up. Underwater exercises. This next set of exercises are for those at Chunin and Jonin level. Please note that these techniques require a rebreather. The chakra bubble. This exercise is a more extreme version of the water walking technique. It takes the concept of pushing chakra off one's feet to keep from touching that water and applies it to the whole body. To do this exercise properly, one must submerge themselves fully in a body of water, and then proceed to exude chakra from every tenketsu point evenly. This will create a small chakra bubble around your entire body. If done correctly, one can go underwater and then come back out completely dry. A rebreather is advised for this exercise. This was by far one of the most challenging exercises he had ever attempted. But it was all worth it, as each day of practice improved his chakra control by leaps and bounds. As a result, Anko finally deemed his control good enough to start learning a few jutsu beyond the henge, and he even started working on some of the jutsu from his aim scroll collection. So far, he had a solid grasp solid henge and kawarimi. Rigorous practice meant that he could perform both with just one hand seal, and almost no smoke at all. After some more pestering and pleading, Anko had been willing to show him fire release, Grand Fireball. From the aim scrolls he had begun practicing Mist Servant technique and Violent Stream. It was finally Naruto's first day at the academy. He wanted to be excited, but he had pride enough and learned what the curriculum would cover over the next 4 years. Suffice to say he realized that he already knew a good portion of it and thus couldn't be excited at all. He had requested to somehow skip the academy altogether, but the Hokage declined. It was hard to hide his disappointment in what he now considered a huge waste of time. Waving goodbye to Anko as she turned to go to her day job, he turned down the street and soon found himself in front of the academy building. He was still 30 minutes early, but he decided to find his classroom and wait inside anyways. Walking through the main doors, past the front desk and ignoring the weird look the secretary gave him, he eventually found the room. Seeing no one, he strode up to the far back corner and sat down. Eventually his head started to nod, and he slumped forward. Awaking with a start a few minutes later, he opened his eyes to see an older man walk in. They both eyed each other for a moment. "You a student?" "Yes," Naruto replied through his mask. The man looked incredulous. "Name?" "Naruto Uzumaki." At his answer, the instructor looked puzzled for a split second, and then scowled at the boy. Naruto sighed. "Of course, I get a teacher that hates me already." "Great. The mask is for." Naruto smirked. "Breathing." The man's frown deepened for a second, until the door opened, and in walked a few more students. Smiling at the other kids as they passed him and took their seats, the teacher seemed to forget about the camo-clad boy in the back. There was a rather loud boy, with 2 red fang marks on his cheeks and a dog in his jacket, that was exclaiming something to 2 other boys, while waving his hands around in the air in a dramatic way. One of the other boys was rather large, and had a swirl mark on both cheeks, while the third had a ponytail similar to Anko's and appeared to be dragging his feet. They each took a seat near the middle of the class and continued chatting happily. Despite looking only half awake, the one with the ponytail seemed to notice Naruto in the back and seemed to sober up when he saw what was written on his forehead. This caused the other 2 to look over and start muttering to each other. The one with the dog in his jacket asked, "Who is that?" "I don't know, but he looks troublesome. Whoever guesses who that was gets 5 internet points. Just head over to the internet headquarters and pick them up for cash and prizes." "What is he wearing on his face?" inquired the dog boy. "I don't know, ask him," responded the larger boy. "HMPH, fine," he retorted. "Hey, what's that thing on your face?" Naruto's eyes smiled at the 3. "It's called a gas mask." "What's it for?" Muttering under his breath about stupid questions he answered. "Breathing." The 3 other students looked at each other and shared a collective shrug and decided it wasn't worth pushing any further for now. They turned back around and watched as more kids entered the classroom. As more took their seats, one thing became clear. Everyone seemed to want to avoid the strange gas-masked boy sitting in the back. The only person willing to sit near him was a sunglass-wearing boy, by the name of Shino Aburame. The bug boy didn't seem to find anything wrong with him. He simply went up to the row that Naruto was sitting in, nodded at the boy, who nodded back, then sat down a seat over from him. As all the students seemed to have finally entered and sat down, the teacher started speaking. "Hello everyone, and welcome to your first day at the academy. My name is Ryushi Kusho and I will be your first-year instructor. This is where you will learn the basics on how to be a ninja of Konohagakure. We'll start with roll call every day, and then move on to the lessons. Today though, since it's your first day, we will be playing icebreaker games." Some students seemed happy, while others groaned. "Okay, time to see if everyone made it. Shino Aburame? Here." Shino raised his hand, and on down the list the teacher went. After determining that everyone was there, he informed them that they were going to play the 2 truths and a lie game. A simple game where a student would come up with 2 truths and a lie about themselves, go up to the front of the class one at a time, and tell all 3 pieces of information. Then the rest of the class would have to try and guess which statement the lie was. After a few minutes of letting the student think, the teacher started to volunteer people to come up. About midway through, the teacher called on Naruto. Sighing, he got up from his seat and went to the front. "I am an orphan," the class started murmuring. "I have never been out of Konoha before. I live in the Forest of Death." At that the volume in the classroom picked up significantly. After some murmuring, the dog boy spoke up. "Well, obviously, there is no way you live in the Forest of Death, that is the lie. I think you forgot an important part of this game, you have to be convincing." The class laughed. Frowning, Naruto stated, "No, that is a true statement." Most students and even the teacher looked flabbergasted, and then began talking amongst themselves again. "You're not an orphan?" called out a random girl. He shook his head. "I am an orphan." "So, then you have been outside of Konoha then?" Naruto nodded and went back up to his desk. Some students seemed impressed with this, most though just went back to chatting among their peers. The rest of the day passed normally, with the teacher starting to a lesson on the 5 great nations. Naruto rolled his eyes and leaned against the wall to see if he could catch some more sleep. "Naruto," Ryushi called out. I asked you a question." Blinking, he asked, "Could you repeat the question?" The teacher frowned and considered simply saying no, but he didn't want to appear mean to the rest of the students. "What are the 5 main villages and their cages?" Konohagakure, Hokage, Kumogakure, Reikage, Kirigakure, Mizukage, Sanagakure, Kasecage and Iwagakure, Tsuchikage. Naruto replied, "Ah, yes, that is correct." Turning back to the class, he continued the lesson. "Ow!" he screamed as he was tackled to the floor. "Why do you do that?" Anko chuckled. "You need to be prepared." "Always," she laughed some more before helping him back up. "So how was your first day?" "Pathetic," Anko raised an eyebrow. "I already knew everything that the instructor talked about today. He shook his head, began trudging towards his room. Yeah, well, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. You're probably one of the smartest kids I know. After stopping for a moment, he rolled his eyes. I'm the only kid you know. Anko shrugged and then looked at him curiously for a moment. By the way, are you planning on wearing that outfit every day? She inquired. Turning slightly, he replied. Yes, I like this outfit. You aren't too hot or anything. He shook his head. Okay then, I was just curious. She smiled at him and then turned back to head towards her room. A few weeks later was October 10th, the anniversary of the Kyuubi attack, Naruto's birthday, and it had been just over a full year since Anko and Naruto had met each other. Morning sleepyhead, a certain Kunoichi yelled as she came bounding in the room. IHSMHTHMEEKMND. Came his reply through a pillow. The purple-haired girl smiled cheekily and poked him in the head a few times. What was that? You infuriating woman, he responded. Wow, nice vocabulary, very sophisticated. She smirked at him. He glared at her. I said, it's the weekend, so I'm taking today off. Let me sleep. Turning back over, he attempted to ignore her, but Anko had other ideas. She walked down to the end of the bed and ripped his sheets off him. Trying to get her to go away, he did his best to not respond. Unfortunately, this just gave her an easy target as she started to pelt him with random objects from around the room. He quickly caved and groggily sat up and rubbed his eyes. What do you want? Anko pouted. Can't your Anko-chan do something special for you on your birthday? Naruto questioned. You know, your birthday? The boy sighed. Oh, it won't be that bad. Actually, if I have my way, it will be a pretty good day for you. Now go get ready and meet me in the kitchen when you're done. And she turned around and walked out. A few minutes later, Naruto came out in his full garb and went into the specified room. Alright, eat some breakfast and then we'll head out. Later that morning, they left their home and started walking towards the village. I have the lots of awesome things planned for you. First, we are going to head to Explosives, R Us. After that, lunch at your favorite place, Ichiraku's. Naruto's mouth started to salivate. Then, I'm going to take you to the Hokage, since he wanted to see you today. After that, well, you can go do whatever you want the rest of the day, I'll do your chores. All of that didn't sound half bad to the young boy. Soon after, the pair stood in front of a store that had a huge sign. Explosives, R Us, with our prices will blow the competition away. Written underneath. Wow, I had no idea this place existed. Naruto mumbled as they walked in. Hello there. Welcome to my store, said a rather tall man. He had a buzz cut, wore a blue long-sleeve shirt, with black pants and shoes. He looked to be about 35 years old, with a bit of scruff growing on his chin. What can I do y'all for? Oh, we're just going to be browsing. Introducing this kid here to the joys of things that go boom. Anko imitated an explosion with her hands and smiled at the man. For the next 3 hours they perused the various different wares in the store, from simple explosive notes, to supercharged explosive notes, to grenades, to even a list of jutsu that had to deal with blowing shit up. Finally, after all that time wandering around the shelves, Anko bought herself some supercharged explosive notes, and 10 normal explosive notes for Naruto as a present. Leaving satisfied, they went on to get some ramen. Hello there. Welcome to Ichiraku's. An older man with short gray hair greeted them. Hey old man. Said old man looked puzzled, so Naruto figured it would be prudent to remove his mask. Oh, hey there Naruto. Didn't recognize you under that mask. Hey Ayame, our favorite customer is back. So, what'll you have? Naruto sat down at the end of the bar, while Anko sat next to him. I'll have a large serving of miso ramen with roasted pork fillet. I'll have a pork ramen bowl please. A few minutes later, they were served their bowls. While Naruto was happily slurping his noodles, Tucci leaned over the counter and whispered to older girl. Hey, I don't mean to be nosy, but what is with the writing on his mask? Anko stole a glance at Naruto to make sure he wasn't listening. Well, I don't know what exactly goes on in that mind of his, but for some reason he has started to fixate on that word. She sighed. He's not a normal kid at all. But I suppose most ninjas, even young ones, are never normal. He just seems to get a kick out of scaring people. Tucci frowned. Well, he does seem pretty normal right now, so hopefully it's just him being a weird kid. Nodding over to where Naruto was, noting that he was chatting with Ayame. Nodding, Anko replied. He's still just a kid, but there's no doubt he's becoming a bit strange, that's the only way I can put it. That certainly doesn't sound good, he replied looking concerned. Then he turned to the young boy. Naruto my boy, that bowl is on the house. Have a good birthday. He smiled and laughed heartily in an attempt to lighten his mood. Thanks, old man, I really appreciate it, your ramen is the best. He nodded and then pulled his mask back on, and stood up. Anko paid for her meal and the pair lifted the flaps on the stand and walked out. I'm worried about that boy, Ayame. Come in. Sarutobi looked up from his paperwork. Oh Naruto-kun, happy birthday. He smiled at the boy. Naruto entered and bowed. Hokage-sama, no need to be so formal, Naruto-kun. I requested your presence today so I could give you a birthday present. Reaching down into a drawer on his desk, he pulled out a small box. Handing it to the boy, he watched as Naruto hesitantly opened the box and looked inside. He picked up a blue bracelet with a golden spiral marking on it. The camo-clad boy looked at the Hokage. That was your mother's favorite bracelet. A look of pure shock went through Naruto's eyes, while a soft smile graced Anko's face. Now before you ask, no, I'm sorry but I cannot tell you who your parents were right now. It's complicated and I'm deeply sorry, but you aren't ready. But I can tell you that I know for a fact both of your parents loved you very much. Standing there, staring at the bracelet in his hand, Naruto wasn't sure what to do. On one hand he wanted to cry and hug the Hokage for giving him the gift, but on the other hand he also wanted to demand why he still couldn't be told about his own goddamn parents. He pushed away that train of thought and simply put the bracelet safely into a pocket on his jacket. He then bowed deeply. Thank you very much Hokage-sama. Turning to Anko, he said, if it's okay with you, I am going to go home now. She nodded. Naruto silently walked out of the office. Anko thanked the Hokage and bowed as well, then followed the boy out. Naruto spent the rest of the day locked in his room. They had put a door on the archway that led to the living room since he was a permanent resident. Anko tried multiple times to get him to come out, but he never answered her calls. The next morning, Naruto went about his chores and went to school as if nothing had changed, but Anko could tell he had a bit more spring in his step. Begin preparation for mission realignment. Hi. The next week was Anko's birthday, and Naruto wanted to pay her back for her part in making his birthday special. So, he spent the entire previous week planning what to do for her. On the morning of her birthday, he went out and got her favorite dango types and brought them back, so she could eat breakfast in bed. After that, he brought her to the top of the Hokage monument where he took out a very nice-looking set of teacups and they had a tea ceremony. He wasn't particularly fond of tea, but he knew that it was one of Anko's favorite hobbies. Anko considered it the best idea ever and hugged him profusely afterwards. Following the ceremony, Naruto took out a wrapped rectangular object and handed it to her. What's this? Open it, he insisted. Ripping open the package, she found a set of 5 exquisite kunai, one for each of the different chakra natures. Each was black, but when reflecting the light at a certain angle, appeared a different color matching to the 5 chakra elements. They were also all carved with intricate patterns along the flat of each blade. Each kunai is made of a different mixture of metals. Naruto explained. They all conduct chakra but react differently to it. The red one will have flames erupt along the blade. The blue one will extend to about 2 feet and will become curved. The brown one will become jagged like the earth. The silver one will become as sharp as a wind blade, and the yellow one will become electrified. Anko gaped at the boy. As the seconds dragged on, Naruto was starting to fidget. Do you like them? She grabbed Naruto in a tight hug. Like them? These are incredible. Amazing. I love them. Where on earth did you get something like this? I've never seen anything like this before. All she heard in response was a bit of gasping coming from Naruto's mask. Looking into an eyepiece, she noticed his eye was starting to roll back into his head. Releasing him, she chuckled and rubbed the back of her head as he coughed a few times. Well, he cleared his throat. I went to the Hokage, and gave him my ideas for the blades, and he pointed me to the proper weaponsmith. Apparently, I was pretty lucky because this guy had just come in to do some work on his son's blades and was going to leave in a week. And, according to the Hokage, he was one of the only men in the fire country that could work the type of metal I had, blades that could do what I had in mind. So, I found him, and he showed me all the different types of chakra conductive kunai he had, and I bought those 5. How much did these cost? It must have been a fortune, she exclaimed. He crossed his arms and shook his head to show he wasn't going to tell her. As it turns out, Naruto had been selling skins, fangs, precious stones and anything else he could find in the forest for quite some time now, so he had amassed enough funds to purchase the blades. She pouted briefly, and then grabbed his hand and proceeded to go around town showing off her new knives to all of her friends, all the while not letting go of Naruto's hand, much to his embarrassment. The rest of Naruto's first year of school proved boring for the young lad, as the academy didn't teach him anything new, and took up a lot of his time. While he could have easily been the top of the class, he ended up missing a good portion of the quizzes and tests, which brought down his grades. The reason being some days he just wouldn't show up, opting to work on his chakra control or a jutsu all day. So even though the tests he did take, he passed with flying colors, he missed enough to be only around the middle of the class in terms of grades. He could tell that the instructor didn't like him very much, as the few disgusted looks he sent Naruto's way were proof enough. But the man did prove that he could be professional when the time called for it and at least treated him with the bare minimum of cold disinterest, which Naruto was just fine with. Most of the students kept their distance from him, while some avoided even looking at him altogether, especially after that one incident. Flashback. It was the 4th week of the academy, and Naruto was simply going through the motions by that time. He would get up, have a small breakfast, and do a chore or two before leaving for school. After arriving at the academy, sitting down and subsequently falling asleep, he waited for the rest of the class to arrive. After the morning lecture, they were let out to lunch, where he went and sat down at the same table as Shino. "Hey Shino, how are you?" he greeted. Shino nodded in his direction. "Hello Naruto. I am fine, you?" "Good." After which they ate in comfortable silence for the rest of their lunch. This was the extent of their relationship. While not the most engaging conversations, they did seem to have an understanding with each other. They chatted briefly every now and again, and appreciated each other's company. A few minutes before the lunch bell rang, the boys got up from their positions and went inside. Shino turned into the classroom, and Naruto went to the boys' restroom. A little while later the first lunch bell rang, and he came out and headed to class. He was a few doors down and had to pass through a doorway before he could get to his classroom, but before he got to the door, he was surrounded by a group of older students. One of the students pointed a finger in his face. "Hey kid, what's with the mask? None of your business. Move." Another smirked. "Now that wasn't very nice. I think you should apologize." Naruto stared at the older boys. "I have nothing to apologize for. Now move." It was then that one of the students went to grab the younger boy. Naruto jumped backwards and pointed both arms at the group and gave them a face full of the sleeping neurotoxin, as he dubbed the red spider venom. The group of boys seemed to stop and waver for a second, and then one by one, they fell onto the ground asleep. Now by this time, a small group of other students had gathered on both sides of the doorway to see what was going on, and witnessed the older boys go down. "Told them to move, idiots." After casually walking over their bodies, Naruto left behind a group of shocked students and sat down at his usual seat in the back of the room. After a few minutes, the lunch bell rang a second time, signaling the start of class, and Ryushi walked in looking a bit perplexed. "Does anyone know why there is a group of boys snoring out in the hallway?" The room was filled with complete and total silence, as no one who saw the event wanted to speak out against the strange student in the back. "Okay then, I'm going to go get the nurse, then I'll be back. Please review your notes for section 3 while I'm gone." Flashback end. After that event, many rumors spread about the young boy. The older boys that had taunted Naruto were so embarrassed that they pretended it didn't even happen. After that incident, they would run away if they saw the camo-clad student. Due to this, a lot of students steered clear of Naruto as much as possible. Though the academy wasn't all bad for the boy, he did have some fond memories of when he would play pranks on the class. While some might say he had a warped sense of humor, he didn't care, as long as he enjoyed himself. One such prank was when, about 4 months into the year, he snuck some harmless garden snakes into the school. It had been extremely early in the morning, and most of the school was vacant at the time. This gave Naruto free rein to hide the snakes in various crevices, under desks, and in ventilation shafts. Later that day students and academy personnel started to find the snakes, resulting in mass pandemonium for the entire school. The instructors spent a good hour trying to calm the students down, and even had to call in a few ninja to put sleeping genjutsu on students that were panicking. The principal attempted to restore order in the classrooms so that he could have the scaly green animals safely removed, but ended up just calling lunch early and sent everyone scurrying out of the building. Naruto was snickering the whole time as he calmly ambled off, so he got some glares from a few random teachers, some of which had snakes wrapped around their arms and hands. Definitely a normal sense of humor, right? How Naruto got his kicks aside, outside of school, his absolute lack of social life, and meant he had time to constantly working on his ninja techniques and making great progress. Even though he had less time than before, he was still working just as hard, if not harder, on all the aspects of being a good ninja. About halfway through the year, he had finally mastered the chakra bubble exercise, which meant his control was good enough to handle the clone technique. He had since moved on to the last control exercise in his arsenal, second skin. This was very similar to the bubble but required the ninja to exit the water while still holding a thin layer of water around their entire body. Once again, Naruto felt like this exercise was ridiculous and excessive, but Anko kept hammering the necessity of good chakra control for a ninja with as much chakra as he had. Deeming his control good enough to start, Anko began to teach him about the wonderful world of genjutsu. His first technique was simple, but under the right circumstances could be very effective. It was called the Sly Mind Effect technique and was one he found with his stash of aim scrolls. A relatively simplistic genjutsu, its goal was to affect the sense of direction of the victim. One of his school pranks involved testing it out on some unsuspecting students by making them walk into the wrong classrooms, or even the incorrect bathroom. By the end of the year, he could perform the technique with only one hand seal and was working on being able to do it with none. His mist servant technique was now almost completely mastered, as was violent stream. Fire release. Grand fireball still required 3 hand seals, but he hadn't been working on it as much. He also began practicing what was called a poison cloud clone and was exceedingly excited to get it working. A few months before the end of the year, Naruto had pestered Anko enough to let him have a piece of chakra paper and found his affinities to be wind and water. This excited him greatly, and he went to the local ninja library to learn about elemental affinity exercises. Soon after, he began to practice things such as cutting and soaking leaves with just his chakra. It was slow going, but he was determined to be able to master both of his affinities. By the start of the next school year, Naruto had grown to a respectable height of 3 feet 10 inches tall, so he was one of the taller second-year students. Stepping into a new classroom, he spotted his second-year teacher. "Hello there, please take a seat. Hopefully this year will be more interesting than the last." Over the next year and a half, things went smoothly for the blonde-haired boy. He had used his skills as a developing ninja, and discreet use of killing intent, to make the civilian population stay out of his way. And his relationship with Anko had evolved to a close friend bond. As it turns out, the Hokage was right. The pair had a positive effect on each other, although at times their more rambunctious and mischievous personalities created a sort of positive feedback loop. "Hey girls." Anko smiled as she waved to her collection of friends. The others, consisting Yugo Azuki, Hana Inuzuka, and Kurenai Yuhi, all waved back from their positions around the table. Anko sat down, and then ordered her usual drink. "You seem to be in a chipper mood today," Hana commented. "Naruto has really blown me away with all of his progress. It's really cool to watch him go," she responded. The kunoichi all smiled at each other, pleased with Anko's genuine happiness. Ever since Anko had met Naruto, those that knew her noticed her overall moods tended to be brighter, and her smiles were generally sincerer. Over the years she had been using her psycho snake lady act less and less. Naruto seemed to fill the hole that had been in her heart, ever since Orochimaru had abandoned her and gifted her with his cursed seal of heaven. "Can you tell us more?" Yugo questioned. Anko took a sip from her cup and leaned back. "The Hokage seems to think he's too serious for a child, but I think he's fine, if a bit quirky. He still has this weird obsession with fear, and poisons, and explosives, but other than that he's just Finn." She smiled at her friends and colleagues. Kurenai's smile faltered a little at the thought of such a young kid find fascination with those subjects, but she couldn't dwell on it long as Anko's own smile turned devious. "So, Hana, I hear you have a new boyfriend?" Hana blushed and tried in vain to cover up her discomfort while the others laughed. They relaxed into familiar banter, enjoying each other's company for the rest of the night. Naruto had been progressing quite well in his training. He had mastered the leaf slicing and soaking exercise and rapidly moved on to the next level of each exercise. His skills with elemental chakra were still relatively mediocre, but he was improving leaps and bounds almost daily. Through the clever use of water and wind manipulation, he could now start moving and expanding gas and mist clouds at will, though it was still a work in progress. He also had recently begun to practice 2 new jutsu, water release, gunshot and wind release, great breakthrough. Finally, Naruto had taken great interest in genjutsu. His creative mind had begun working overdrive, trying to come up with his own set of unique illusions under the title of Demented Illusions. He had an idea of what he wanted the jutsu to do, but since he didn't have a genjutsu instructor, his progress was somewhat slow. With Anko as a willing test subject though, he was able to get a lot of the basics down. Flashback. Anko stood across from Naruto in a clearing in the forest. She motioned for him to start. After a set of hand seals, her world morphed slightly and the Naruto in front of her changed to be holding a sign with the number 3 on it. She changed the flow of her chakra, and the 3 swirled into a 1. She noted the trees and ground swayed unnaturally, and the sign was heavily distorted. She dispelled the genjutsu one more time and the sign disappeared altogether. 2 layers. First the sign had a 3 on it, then I dispelled that layer and it changed to a 1. The second layer was messed up though, not very subtle. She commented. Naruto let out a sigh. Well, that is an improvement at least, couldn't even get any layers at all a while ago. But, how the hell did it go from the 3rd layer to the 1st, he pondered. Anko shrugged. Don't know, never been very good with genjutsu myself. You sure you don't want me to get some proper training for you? Like a mentor? These scrolls can only help you so much. He shook his head. No, I want to learn this myself. Once I figure it out, I will have a completely unique genjutsu style. His friend nodded her head and then pulled out a kunai. Now then, let's practice some more dodging today. Naruto grimaced and got into his stance. Flashback end. Naruto had improved since that day and could get 2 solid layers by now, but his work was ever ongoing. Ultimately, he wanted a 5-layer genjutsu, and little did he know that this feat was considered impossible for even the most accomplished genjutsu users. The solid thunk of metal burrowing into wood was met with a tisk. A man with short black hair looked down at his clipboard. That was barely on target. 2 points off. Naruto had to resist the urge to attempt to stab the man in the throat. Son of a. The kunai was so poorly weighted no one could throw it on target, jackass. You know what? Fuck this. There's no way I'm putting up with this all year. He slowly walked away, plotting his revenge. The last 2 years I've maintained fine grades. Now one bigoted teacher is going to make me tank. I'll just have to fix that. Teiko, Naruto's instructor, was walking along the dark streets after a night of drinking with his friends. Dealing with brats all day, especially the Kyuubi that was in his class this year, forced him to drink away his days. He sipped on a bottle of sake as he walked, but suddenly he started to cough violently. After a moment, he looked into his hand and saw blood. This surprised him enough that he dropped the bottle and spilled its contents on the ground as his knees began to shake. He staggered and fell onto his side. A figure appeared to walk up to him, perhaps a concerned citizen that would help him back up. In desperation he reached out and grabbed the ankle of the person, but his hands simply went through it. Teiko's bleary eyes searched upwards in terror and were met with a shadowy visage. Black tendrils writhed around the dark figure and bright red eyes seemed to stare through his skull. He blinked and clumsily rubbed at his eyes, but the specter could not be vanquished. After a moment, a demented chuckle emanated from the apparition. Its voice, deep and demonic, took hold of Teiko. Teiko Hama, your days are numbered. You have angered Shinigami, and he will have your soul. Teiko's vision was worsening, and he was prepared to do anything to live. No, wait, he croaked out. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. The figure chuckled again. Your pleading is humorous. Very well. Resign from your position. Go live out your days in humility and never return to this village. Teiko nodded furiously and was surprised when the figure reached out and a mist emanated from its long sleeves. He couldn't help but inhale the gas and soon he began to lose sensation in his legs and arms. After another second his body completely gave out and he lost consciousness. So easy, Naruto thought. Just a minuscule amount of poison to disorient him, a little killing intent, and finally some genjutsu to add to the effect. With just those three, he's no longer a ninja, but a scared little child. Well, the alcohol probably helped a little too. Ah well, fear is fear, intoxicated or not. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded note. Bending down, he placed the note into one of Teiko's pockets. After he was done, a mist surrounded the area, and he jumped away. Minutes later, a random citizen would come upon the unconscious form of the Chunin. Noticing the blood, he quickly took the unconscious man to the hospital. A day later, the man woke and immediately quit his teaching job, fearing retribution from the demon that he had provoked. He didn't really like that job anyways. Despite being in the bright and safe atmosphere of the hospital, he couldn't shake the dread that had crept into his chest when he thought of that figure. Perhaps he would become a farmer and enjoy the simple life of the country. All he knew is that he wanted to leave this cursed village and never return to its walls. A few weeks later, Naruto was enjoying the crisp air as he took a morning stroll around the streets of Konoha. He took great satisfaction that most citizens completely avoided his gaze. He had developed quite a reputation within the Hidden Leaf, and he wanted to keep it that way. He sighed contentedly, his life was so much quieter, and people were sometimes even polite now. As he rounded a corner, someone bumped into him. He muttered something unintelligible and tried to keep walking, but a hand grabbed his arm. He turned to glare at whoever dared touch him but saw a friendly face. "Hey there Naruto-kun, where are you off to?" Ayame said as she released her grip of his arm. Naruto's gaze softened. He couldn't be mad at one of his favorite people. "Hello Ayame, nowhere particular. How are you?" "I'm doing well. I'm just going for a walk too. Would you care to join me?" Naruto reflected on his plans for the day and decided none of it was pressing. He was more than happy to spend some quality time with the waitress. After a moment he nodded. "Sure. So, Naruto, do you ever take off that mask?" "Not really, honestly it's really comfy. And I always want to be prepared in case anything happens." "You're too serious Naruto-kun." They continued to chat and meander their way through Konoha. Their wandering eventually led them to a secluded area in the middle of a large park. Ayame stopped and sat down by a tree, and Naruto joined her. A comfortable silence fell. Soon though, a lone figure jumped down in front of them. Naruto was totally caught off guard and immediately put on high alert. The figure had on an Anbu mask that he didn't recognize, black pants and shirt, and a tanto strapped to its back. Ayame, noticing how Naruto was staring intently at the man, attempted to placate him. "Naruto, calm down. The Anbu just want to talk to you." Naruto wasn't listening though. He had seen plenty of Anbu and this man did not move like one. His stance was too rigid, and his posture was subtly aggressive. The figure spoke up. "Ayame Ichiraku, your services are no longer required. Your payment has already been placed into your account. Please leave the area." Lacking the usual professional but calm tone of the usual Anbu, this voice seemed devoid of any emotion. The figure then took a step forward. "Naruto Uzumaki, you are to come with me." Naruto stood quickly and analyzed the situation. On the one hand, this man could be from the Hokage, and not complying could lead to serious consequences. Alarm bells were blaring in his head though. Clearly Ayame had been paid to bring him into a secluded area, which the Hokage wouldn't have found necessary. The monotone was too striking to ignore, as none of the Anbu he had ever heard speak sounded like this man. Finally, the hostile posture seemed out of place for the regular Anbu coming to collect a Konoha subject. Naruto knew none of this added up and decided going quietly was not an option. As fast as he could, he sent a small volley of shuriken at the man. The Anbu was quick to dodge and sent a return volley of his own, forcing the Jinchuriki to roll. Most of the ANBU's projectiles flew over him, but one caught him in the shoulder. That confirmed it. The Hokage's men would not have returned fire so quickly, but rather immediately moved to reason and then subdue the boy if necessary. Ayame looked confused and distraught. "Wait, no, what are you doing?" she yelled. Another Anbu appeared behind her and chopped her neck, knocking her out effortlessly. He grabbed her body and shinned away. Pain shot through his arm as he dodged backwards and formulated a plan. He figured that there would be more enemies, so he was outnumbered, but the fighting style he had been developing would compensate for that. He guessed he would be outclassed as well. His only chance would be if his enemies hadn't seen his fighting style and were taken by complete surprise. As fast as he could, he threw down some smoke grenades and used the brief respite to fly through hand seals. After finishing his sequence, he extended his arms and a thick mist flooded out of his sleeves and filled the area. Soon the visibility became zero and Naruto knew his chances of victory rose significantly. He could already tell that whoever was after him had no idea what he could do, as their reaction time was abysmal. Now, the smart move would have been to use this opportunity to escape, but Naruto was itching for a fight. The academy lessons and occasional spar with Anko never let him go all out, and he wanted to test himself. At the very least, he reasoned with himself, he wanted to see who he was up against and perhaps find out who they were before he tucked tail and ran. The Jinchuriki's heart was pounding in his ears. Whether it was from excitement, fear, or pure adrenaline he wasn't sure, but he was beginning to crack a manic smile. He was going to have fun using every trick he could pull to beat these bastards. The chakra mist was just the start. Using it, he could feel movement within the area, acting as a sort of early warning detection system. The mist muffled virtually all light and sound within it, so he could move around mostly undetected. Based on the movement, I can sense 5 total right now. 2 above in the trees to my left, 2 more on the right, and 1 in front of me. I'll take the one out first. He shot out a rather large cloud of vaporized venom into the air and began to encase parts of it in chakra, creating poison cloud clones as well as mist servants. Spreading them out, Naruto's main goal was to keep his enemies separated and completely occupied with dodging and fighting clones. If he could keep any of them from having time to perform any jutsu, he would have a much greater chance at success. Eventually they would tire, and that is when he would be able to take them down. He hoped his bleeding shoulder didn't hamper him too much, but it might if it didn't heal fast enough and the fight dragged on too long. One of his poison cloud clones approached the fake Anbu that had spoken and made an attempt to stab a kunai into his back. His opponent ducked and in one fluid motion, unsheathed the tanto on his back and spun around to stab the clone in the leg. The clone dispersed into the deadly gas, and though the man tried to dodge the cloud, he got a face full of the venom. He immediately began to cough violently, and blood started dripping from the bottom of his mask. He shook his head and made to jump away, but his legs faltered, and he fell forward onto his face. Blood soon pooled around his head as he groped at the ground, trying to find purchase. He would never to rise again. Elsewhere, the other clones were not having as much luck. The separation strategy Naruto had conjured up only worked to a degree, and the 2 pairs were able to stay together. Even in the fog they were able to cover each other's backs efficiently, and Naruto was getting irritated. There was a brief stalemate as each clone that approached was cut down by a veritable hail of thrown weapons, but Naruto had a few more tricks up his sleeve. From his hiding spot up in a nearby tree, Naruto threw out a barrage of poisoned senbon toward one of the pairs. Distracted by the constant flood of clones, the masked man closest to the boy caught a few in the arm. The adder venom entered the man's veins and his arm went limp within seconds. Ignoring his wounded arm, the Anbu sent a return volley towards the origin of the senbon. Naruto dodged and began to loop around the pair. He knew that target was now a dead man walking. Jumping down behind some of his clones, he used them as cover to get as close as possible to the operatives. Even being within a few feet of each other, the Anbu could only see vague outlines around them. Knowing this, Naruto stealthily placed 2 explosive notes on the side of a nearby tree and jumped away as they began to fizzle. A muffled explosion rocked the area, and the blonde-haired boy smiled even wider. Just 2 to go, he cackled internally. The thrill of battle was intoxicating to him, and he wanted more. He was so enthralled as he jumped towards the last pair that he didn't even notice that he was able to use his arm again. The Kyuubi's chakra had been working overdrive to heal the damage, and while sore, he had full mobility again. The last pair was attempting to stave off the clones by standing up in the boughs of a tree. Unfortunately for them, Naruto practiced daily in his forest, and had no problems navigating the branches and leaves. As his clones continued to confuse and harass his enemies, Naruto jumped to the base of the tree and placed 5 explosive notes down. His rapidly evolving plan was to topple the tree and hope that his clones could swarm them as they fell. If that didn't work, he had other options. Another explosion rocked the area and the Anbu noticed their perch began to lean. Mist servants and poison cloud clones surged forward, but the men were able to stave off the onslaught, even while they fell. Naruto used this opportunity to Kawarimi with one of the clones on the ground. He was betting on the fact that he was identical to his clones visually, and that they would mistake him for one. As they hit the ground and rolled, neither was ready for a solid kunai to meet them. Naruto's arm shot out and caught the first man in the stomach. Despite that, the man swiped at Naruto with his tanto. Dodging backward, Naruto was fascinated by the total lack of reaction from his opponent. He knew he was going to die, but he didn't seem to care. He knows no fear. The last Anbu abandoned his comrade and jumped away. Naruto was too enraptured by staring into the mask of the slowly dying man. He didn't direct his clones to follow. Using that time, the remaining man flew through hand seals as quickly as he could. He reached the end of his sequence and sent a grand fireball careening forward towards the boy. Or so he thought. Said boy puffed into a purple smoke, as Naruto had Kawarimi'd again without the man noticing. The brief surprise was all it took to distract the man and he landed within a foot of the real Naruto. A fierce but increasingly one-sided taijutsu match began. Naruto was quick, way above most of his peers, but his hubris got the best of him. He was no match for this trained ninja in hand-to-hand combat. The Jinchuriki did his best to dodge and weave around the ninja's blows, but he just couldn't match his speed and power. Finally, the Anbu caught Naruto's chest in a solid blow and sent him reeling backwards. The boy was quickly followed by a few hurled kunai, all of which caught him in the midsection. Fuck, he cursed as he landed on his back and tumbled. The man decided to not waste any time, and quickly jumped forward in hopes of subduing the boy. He used his tanto to stab at the boy's leg and was rewarded with a squelch and yelp of pain. The man then moved to choke Naruto into submission but was met with one last surprise that Naruto had up his sleeve. A spray of mist exited Naruto's jacket and caught the ninja full in the face, seeping into his mask. He continued forward, pressing his hands into the masked boy's neck, but his strength was rapidly fading. He couldn't resist for long and he toppled forward, paralyzed. Naruto rolled the Anbu off, and then took one of his poisoned senbon and pushed it into the neck of his final enemy. Only fainted gurgling emanated from the painted mask, not that Naruto cared at this point. He knew the venom would kill the man within moments. Exhausted, he stood up and released his chakra mist. As he looked down at his bloody chest, leg and arm he let out a growl of frustration. What the fuck? Can I trust no one in this village? He threw a few kunai at a tree in anger then staggered briefly. A moment later he collapsed, blacking out from exhaustion. Hours later he regained consciousness. He rose shakily, dusted himself off, and limped home. I need to find out who they were, as I'm sure that won't be the last I hear from them. He mused. It appears that Squad 15 has failed. Their corpses were found near the meeting point. A kneeling figure stated. A lone eye narrowed. How did he manage to defeat a whole squad on his own? He isn't even a genin yet. He is even more of a hazard than I thought. It's not a complete loss though. He will have lost trust in one of his closest compatriots within the village. He will be easier to mold now, but he will be on guard as well. I will need to be careful. How did they die? One appeared to have asphyxiated and has no outward markings or injuries. Another was hit close range by an explosive note or jutsu. The final three had various stab wounds. Two did not appear to have been wounded in a major artery, leading to the conclusion that some sort of poison was used by the subject. Have the bodies moved to our research labs. We need to discover the poison and start developing antidotes. Report to me when they are finished. Hi. The figure stood and exited the room. The next day Naruto was exiting the academy after a day of class. Naruto. Ayame called out as she ran up to him. He turned to glare at her. Do not come near me. His voice cold and distant. It might have been a trick of the light, but the fear written on his mask seemed to almost glow. The girl's eyes began to well with tears. I'm so sorry. They told me they were going to help you. Not try to hurt you. Please believe me, she begged. Naruto shook his head. You cannot be trusted. I will not be associating with you anymore. Leave me alone. A bit of killing intent leaking out to prove his point. He walked past her and didn't look back at the sobbing girl. Naruto wasn't quite the same after the incident with Ayame. He refused to ever go back to Ichiraku's or explain why, much to the confusion of Anko. Eventually she went to Ichiraku's by herself to see if the owner or his daughter knew what was up. She met a Yame and the girl told her how she was approached by people she thought were from the Hokage. They had asked her to lead Naruto to a park where he could be talked to. Anko wondered how the girl could be so naive, given the odd location in the middle of a secluded forest, but didn't push it. The kunoichi promised that she would talk to Naruto for a Yame and left. She immediately went to the Hokage's office and told him all that she had learned. The Hokage told her that he would investigate. The knowledge that there were rogue Anbu agents was incredibly worrying for the aged man, and he knew who he would need to talk to. Danzo. Naruto, why didn't you tell me about getting attacked? The purple-haired girl asked. The boy shrugged. I felt it was my problem to deal with. And it was already over by the time I could talk to you anyways. Anko nearly face-palmed. Getting attacked by rogue Anbu is not something you should be dealing with on your own. She admonished. I survived. All the training you've had me go through, plus the jutsu I learned from the aim scrolls helped me wipe the floor with them. Anko developed a bit of a smirk, and then smacked his shoulder. It should have. No student of mine is allowed to be beaten by a bunch of lackeys. Her smirk faded somewhat. Just let me know next time, you big idiot. Some things need teamwork to overcome. The boy just rolled his eyes behind the glass of his eyeholes. Anko sighed. We will be upping your training even more now. I guess we can't wait for you to be an official ninja to get into the real shit. Then she remembered something and frowned. Are you sure you cannot forgive a Yame? She's such a kind-hearted girl and sounded truly apologetic. I honestly don't think she knew what was going on. Naruto stepped back and shook his head. I cannot trust her anymore, just shows me that I will have to be on guard more. While Anko agreed that it would be smart to have him more prepared, she was increasingly concerned what was going on in that mind of his. She would have to try her best to get him to relax and have fun occasionally to distress. She didn't need him developing any more quirks. In the following months Naruto focused his frustration and anger into developing his genjutsu. He utilized Anko's access to the Konoha Ninja Library to get as many books and scrolls on the subject as he could. Hours spent scouring the texts finally produced a major breakthrough. One of the books described how early self-taught genjutsu masters utilized meditation in order to better understand how their chakra, body, and brain were intertwined. They would delve deep into their own consciousness, and then move their chakra like they would against an opponent and see what visions or feelings they could produce internally. After that revelation, Naruto wasted no more time reading, and metaphorically jumped into his own mind via the seal containing the Kyuubi. Once he arrived, instead of greeting the beast, he roamed his mindscape alone. As he spent time inside his mind, he mapped as much as possible, learning where the various memory and sensory cortexes were. Without any hesitation the boy began to experiment with chakra injections and patterns, learning what chakra could produce what visions or feelings. These internal tests meant the Jinchuriki could learn the absolute core of what genjutsu was and how it worked, like learning how to utilize machine code to command a computer's CPU. Though the work required was much more intensive, the result of this training was genjutsu built from the proverbial ground up. He could ensure no chakra was wasted and his genjutsu could be as malicious as possible. His first total success he dubbed Demented Illusion, Infestation, and he was almost beside himself in anticipation waiting for someone to try it on. Naruto's wish would be granted, perhaps much sooner than he had planned. At this moment Naruto was walking around Konoha at night, as he often found the stars and quiet relaxing. He had just rounded a corner, when he heard a muffled scream and the sound of cloth tearing. His brain now working on overdrive and his heart rate picking up speed, he took off in search of the source of the sound. Rounding another corner and looking down an alley, he saw two dark figures, one laying on the ground and the other bent over the first. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the person on the ground was a gagged woman. Her shirt and pants had been torn off, leaving her in undergarments. The second figure turned out to be a man, short-cut brown hair, with scruff around his chin. He was wearing a dark shirt, with black cargo pants and black sandals. The man was a chunin by the name of Goru Hiraki, who had been working on subduing the woman, so he could get the rest of her clothes off. One would think that the ninja of the village would be above such vile acts, but even some of the Konoha nin thought of themselves above the law and abused their power. The occasional corrupt or otherwise unscrupulous individual was not uncommon in any of the villages. As soon as Naruto had spotted the two individuals and they in turn noticed him, all three froze. The woman had tears running down her face and sent a pleading look Naruto's way, while the man sneered. "Get out of here, freak, this ain't none of your business." Naruto stood stock still for another few seconds, and then his breath hitched when he looked at the woman again. Anko, seeing his best friend, his savior, getting attacked and raped by this man sent Naruto over the edge. He began to unconsciously pull on the Kyuubi's chakra, and his eyes began to glow red. "You, how dare you, I will kill you," Naruto screamed. Darting forward, he jumped over the man and kicked him in the back of the head, knocking him away from the woman. After landing, he pulled out a set of senbon and threw them. The Chunin had broken out of his stunned state and clumsily dodged and blocked the senbon with his own kunai. Naruto began walking forward, out of the alleyway and towards the man, all the while throwing this seemingly endless supply of weapons. Many glistened with deadly toxins. Adrenaline coursed through Goru's veins and he slammed his hands into the ground. Earth release. Earth-style wall. A wall rose out of the ground and was pelted with a barrage of kunai and senbon. "Shit, fuck, I've got to get out of here," the man said to himself. He took off in a sprint and tried to put as much distance between himself and the crime scene as possible. After running a few minutes, he noticed the road shimmer slightly. He pulsed his chakra. Kai. The environment swirled and morphed into a forest. Nearby, Naruto landed to the ground and was finishing a long set of hand seals. "We're all alone now and you will feel true fear. Demented illusion. Infestation." Goru's world morphed and changed to a small metal cage with total darkness surrounding it. He looked around smirked. "This is the lamest genjutsu I've ever seen. I'm in a cage, boo-hoo. Kai." He yelled, but nothing changed. He was going to try again but he noticed something. His arms were starting to itch. Bringing them up, he inspected them. At first, he didn't see anything, but then his skin appeared to become bumpy and the itching became worse. The bumps got larger and started to writhe, and he started to get itching on other places in his body. Clawing at his left arm, he broke his skin open to reveal large maggots that were digging their way through his muscles and skin. They were a fleshy gray color, and had tiny mouths covering their bodies. The Chunin screamed and began to dig the grubs out, piercing some with his fingernails. Some of the grubs latched onto his hands and began to gnaw on them. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw one of the disgusting creatures break out of his right cheek. He screamed louder and grabbed the slimy larva and threw it onto the ground, only for another to take its place. This went on for a couple minutes, and eventually Goru's mind began to collapse into shock. The cage and darkness faded to a dull gray and his breathing began to normalize. After peering into the gray void for a moment, the cage rematerialized around him. This snapped him out of his shock and he looked down at his arms to see that they were bloody but free of the vile maggots. Then he felt his stomach lurch and the skin around it become pock-marked with holes. From inside him came hundreds of spiders, each one skittering out of his midsection and onto his skin, their small hairy legs scratching against his flesh. Some began to bite him, while others jumped to different parts of his body. Goru screamed again and began to claw at his body, while rolling around on the cage floor. Back in the real world, Naruto was staring as Goru screamed and tore at his body. He felt satisfaction knowing this man, this monster, would tear at his own skin and eventually make himself bleed out. The boy mentally promised Anko that her attacker would be dead by morning. The third Hokage and a few Anbu landed around Naruto and took stock in the situation. What they saw made the less experienced Anbu shudder. "Naruto," Sarutobi commanded, "release this man from your jutsu." Ignoring the order, Naruto was locked onto the Chunin currently writhing on the floor. As the Hokage leaned in closer to the boy, he heard him mumbling to himself. "He's going to rape Anko. I can't let him do it. He must die. He must feel agony. He will know fear," he muttered. Grimacing, the old man placed a hand on his shoulder, placed him under a sleep-inducing jutsu, and caught him as he fell unconscious. At that the genjutsu was cancelled and the torment of Goru was halted. He stopped screaming, but his mouth frothed and slowly continued to scratch at his arms. "Take him to the hospital, and make sure he's got a guard at all times." "I will handle Naruto," the third commanded. Jumping towards the forest of death, Sarutobi cursed. What a terrible situation that the boy had been put in. No child should have to see that side of the world, especially someone who had already seen too much hatred and evil. The poor Jinchuriki was already broken and bruised as it was. Coming. Anko opened the door. Hokage-sama. She then noticed Naruto's unconscious form and sent an alarmed look towards the old man. What happened? Is he okay? Was it more rogue Anbu? Sarutobi sighed. No, Anko, but there was an incident. May I come in? Yes, of course. I will take him. She grabbed Naruto and proceeded to take him into his room and lay him down on his bed. Closing the door, she took the Hokage into the dining room and sat down across from him. Earlier, Naruto came across a chunin that was attempting to, he paused briefly, rape a young woman in an alley. From what the victim told us, Naruto attacked the man and pursued him into a nearby forest. When my Anbu and I found him, Naruto had already been drawing upon the Kyuubi's chakra, which is what alerted the nearby ninja to come get me. He apparently had put the man under a rather disturbing genjutsu, as he was screaming and clawing at his own skin. It also seems that Naruto mistaken the young woman to be you. Anko looked grim. Not only had a ninja of her home village attempted to rape a young woman, but Naruto had come upon the scene. While she was glad that he had saved the poor woman, she was worried about the lasting effects it would have on her friend. The Hokage matched her expression. I'm very concerned, Miss Mitarashi. The boy has already seen the bad side of our village on too many occasions. I'm afraid that his will of fire might be fading. I don't know what to do, Hokage-sama. I can't watch him all the time. What should I do? She inquired. I suppose you will just have to keep as close to him as you can. Your bond is strong, and at the moment that is what he needs. I will speak with the principal about Naruto's last year. He will need an instructor that can nurture him and encourage positive traits in the boy. The man rubbed his beard and thought. I think I have an instructor in mind that will fit that role nicely. Assuming he passes his last year, I am also formulating a genin team for him. He needs more friends within the village and to be shown that there are those that care about him. The pair nodded at each other, then the old man began to head towards the door. This has added a number of things to my plate for tonight. I'm sorry, but I will have to head out for tonight. I will be checking in regularly to see how he is doing. Good night, Miss Mitarashi. The Hokage opened the front door and shunshined out of the home. Anko went to Naruto's door and peeked in. Seeing he was still out cold, she walked back to her room and laid on her bed, mind working over what she had just heard. This was such an awful thing to happen to the boy. She wished she could have been there instead of him. She would have enjoyed letting her snakes get a bite or two out of that idiotic chunin. The next morning, she made sure to stay home until the boy got up. After he left his room and saw Anko, all the memories flooded back. He was frantic for a moment, rushing over to check on her. The kunoichi had to grab him by the shoulders and stare into his eyes to get him to relax for a moment. After he came back to reality, she explained what had happened. You did, however, save a poor woman. On behalf of her, thank you, Naruto. Now please sit down while I get you some food. The silence was deafening as the boy ate. He barely made a peep as he munched on his toast, and actively avoided his friend's gaze. Okay, so you're out of school for the year, so there's no class to worry about. Please take today to relax. You need some time to decompress. I would stay, but work has really backed up on me and my boss will kill me if I skip today. Within the T&I building, the purple-haired chunin was getting some coffee and overheard a conversation between some co-workers. You hear what happened to Goru? One asked. The other nodded. Yeah, and I say he deserved it. Really? I mean, what he did was horrible, but to be reduced to a quivering mass for the rest of his life? That's pretty bad. He grimaced. The second chunin scoffed. He tried to rape a woman. I think he's lucky to be alive. Should just be executed right now, in my opinion. Anko easily put two and two together. Must be the guy that Naruto ran into. I need to go talk to Ibiki and see what I can find out. She took her mug and walked out towards Ibiki's office. Knocking and then entering, she stood in front of his desk. Ibiki looked up from a piece of paper he was filling out. Anko, what brings you to my office today? She sat down in a chair and looked solemn. I wanted to ask about the recent incident. It involved a chunin by the name of Goru. Happened last night. Ah yes, he shuffled through some folders on the side of his desk and pulled one out. He scanned the documents within. Goru Haraki, accused of attempted rape. Apprehended last night by Anbo. Currently held in the psych wards, he shook his head and whistled in amazement. Diagnosed by Yamanaka with panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, entomophobia, arachnophobia, and delusional parasitosis. Dishonorably discharged from the Konohagakure shinobi force by order of Hokage. He put the sheet down. I went and saw him just an hour ago, to see if I could get some answers out of him. But from what I could tell, he won't be a functioning member of society anytime soon, even if he gets out of life in prison, he snorted. Hell, he can't even be relieved of his straitjacket before he starts ripping at his arms and face, screaming about worms and other things. He observed Anko with a calculating eye. I know rumors are quick to spread, but how do you already know of this case? Anko sighed. Naruto witnessed the event and attacked Goru. He was the one who put him into the state he's in now. Really? He whistled again? That's impressive actually. To be able to put a Chunin in the mental hospital and he's not even be a genin yet. Very impressive indeed. That boy has some talent for genjutsu. Anko's face turned very serious. Ibiki, Naruto just saw an attempted rape. I'm worried for him. I know from past experiences that he has a strong mind, but this really seemed to affect him. I would try and counsel him, but I mostly know about how to break the mind, not put it back together again. Do you know any good psychiatrists? Ibiki scratched the top of his head for a moment. You know, I think that the best option would be Dr. Yamura. He works with victims and family members of those that are affected by crimes such as rape. I think he should be able to help Naruto. She rose and bowed slightly. Thank you, Ibiki. Then she turned and left the room. Deep underneath Konoha, a lone eye peered down at the kneeling form of a man. Report, he ordered. The man's response was crisp and flat. We have confirmed some of the details. The Jinchuriki was involved in an attempted rape incident. He had discovered Chunin Goru Hiraki attacking a civilian woman. Uzumaki chased Hiraki into a nearby forest, where he put him under a genjutsu. From what is understood, the genjutsu had serious effects on his mind, and as of now is currently held in the psychiatric ward of the Konoha hospital. The man fell silent after his report. The man closed his eye and stood still for a moment, before turning around and slowly walking down the hallway. This would not have happened if my men could have captured him, but I cannot show any more of my hand. Sarutobi is paying much more attention now. I will have to wait till the others can hold up their end of the deal. Elsewhere, in the Forest of Death, Naruto was currently having an argument with Anko. Naruto, I really think you should talk to a psychiatrist about what happened. It will help. Ibiki even recommended this guy. The kunoichi said. He shook his head. I'm fine. I'm okay, really. Naruto. No. I will not have some doctor poke around in my mind and ask me, how does that make you feel, day after day? He bit back. Oh, see now the truth comes out. It's not that you're fine. You just don't want someone to help you. Anko crossed her arms and stared at her friend. After a brief battle of wills, Anko threw up her arms. Fine. Be a stubborn asshole, she stormed out of the room. Naruto sat at the table unmoving for a few minutes. He was mad at the world, and angry with himself as well for being unwilling to get help. After another 30 minutes his purple-haired friend came back into the room, looking apologetic. Hey, I'm sorry for calling you an asshole. You've been through a lot and I shouldn't push you right now. Naruto shrugged and continued staring at the table. How about we go get some food, get your mind off it? The boy nodded. After a relatively quiet dinner, they were walking home enjoying the serene evening. It was late, and the village nightlife was coming out. Anko, someone yelled out. The pair turned around to see a Chunin running up to them. Anko seemed to recognize him as a friend, or at least acquaintance. There you are. Me and some people are getting together tonight. Want to come? Anko smiled at the prospect of hanging out and probably drinking. Sure. Then she remembered her companion and turned to him. Naruto-kun, I want you to be honest with me. You can say no if you mean it. Are you going to be alright by yourself? He nodded, not wanting her to miss out on some fun because of him. She gave him a critical eye, then hugged him before turning to the Chunin. So, who's coming? We've got Kurenai coming, Hayate will probably show up, Genma, Azumo, and with him Katetsu. He continued listing people off as they walked away. The Chunin snuck an arm around Anko's shoulder and she didn't seem to mind. At that moment, his paranoia and anger flared. He twitched his arms, pulled out 2 poisoned kunai and prepared to throw. Then he stopped and clenched his teeth in frustration. He fought with himself briefly, and then he shook his head and retracted the blades. Naruto knew that she was more than able to handle herself, but he was much more paranoid now. The incident with Goru had left a deep scar on his mind. As he turned back around, he noticed some people had stopped in the street and were staring at him. He glared at them, let loose some ki and pulled the blades back out. The people quickly looked away and hurried back to their business. Naruto growled and walked back towards the forest he called home. Hello. A woman stopped in front of Naruto. He stayed silent, as he recognized her but couldn't place it. The woman had wavy auburn hair that shone in the evening sun. Her face was nice, but relatively plain. She appeared to be about 5'8" and wore a beige shirt with dark brown pants. She smiled weakly. "I'm sorry, let me introduce myself. My name is Makiko. I just wanted to say, thanks so much," she blurted out as he grabbed him in a fierce hug. Naruto was completely shocked and had to resist freaking out. He fought with himself for another moment while the woman squeezed him. She eventually released him, and his brain made the connection. This was the woman from that night, with Goru. He swayed his head, as if to move his jumble of emotions aside. "You're welcome." He managed to get out. She let a tear flow down her cheek as she smiled at him. She tried to see into his mask, to find a brave boy that had saved her, but even staring deep into the eyes of her hero she couldn't find any warmth. His eyes looked dead and lifeless one moment, but then appeared to glint with a strange sense of mania the next. She also noted the fear written on the forehead of his mask and pondered the word for a second. "Other people fear you," she began hesitantly, but her confidence grew. "But I don't agree with them. You wouldn't have saved me if you weren't a decent person. I know you are a good person." "Kind words," he chuckled humorlessly. "But sometimes you need to listen to others," he stated and began to turn away. "No, even if you don't believe it yourself, I do." Her voice full of conviction. "You are a hero to me." Then she hummed briefly. "Maybe I can treat you to some dinner as a thank you?" Naruto shook his head. "I'd rather not," and he began to move. He then turned back for a moment. "I'm glad I saved you, but I'm not a good guy." Why would he say that about himself? She wondered, but her convictions wouldn't allow her to see him as someone to be feared. She knew he had decency in him, even if he couldn't see it. Someday he would prove her right, she just knew it. The next couple weeks proved extremely difficult for the boy. Anko had to leave on an emergency high-ranking mission and was going to be gone for an unspecified amount of time. Alone, Naruto spent his days and nights going over what had recently happened and his past. All those depressing years when he was younger. First, the orphanage where he was picked on and bullied. Then, that horrible life on the streets trying to scrounge for food out of trash bins and avoiding the angry populace. Then, that would inevitably take him to his favorite person in the world, that wonderful purple-haired girl that saved him. His face would break into a small smile when he thought of how she turned his life around. But then, he would remember that night when he found Goru attacking Makiko, who he had mistaken for Anko. When he remembered seeing her beaten up and crying on the ground, he got a terrible roiling anger in his gut. His muscles would tense, and he could almost feel fire coursing through his veins. He loved but despised that feeling. That night kept creeping to the forefront of his mind and he just felt like crushing something. He wanted to punch the wall or pick up his desk and throw it through his window. He would often end up pacing around the room in the middle of the night, arguing with himself over whether he should go find Goru and finish what he started to bring himself some closure. Maybe that will ease his mind, but then he thought of Anko arguing with him about needing help, needing a psychiatrist. He wasn't sure what he should do. His mind also strayed to the day that one of his closest friends had sold him out. The girl that always smiled at him and talked to him while he ate his favorite meal had betrayed him. No matter her intentions, she had almost gotten him killed or abducted. His already small number of people he could trust was dwindling. If he had been on guard, he could have avoided getting stabbed in the shoulder, and probably the fight altogether. At the very least he could have not walked directly into a trap. But he had been distracted by enjoying his time with Ayame and had paid the price. His wounds, although healed at this point, reminded him that now he would have to be constantly aware of his surroundings. He had to be steps ahead of everyone if he could. He needed to be alert. He couldn't stand it, the constant thoughts streaming through his mind. It drove him mad, confused him, and made him feel helpless. He had gotten little to eat in over 2 weeks, and he slept even less. He couldn't focus at all, couldn't practice his jutsu or tinker with his suit. He would take his scrolls and sit down in an attempt to read, but he would get sidetracked immediately. It was as if his mind was incapable of focusing on anything but his past, or his frustration. Ironically, that frustration would just aggravate him even more, as he would get angry at himself for feeling this way. He just didn't want to do anything, but he also wanted to just go out and blow something to smithereens. Soon enough, his thoughts started to become even more erratic and disturbing. Finally, after 2 mentally and emotionally draining weeks, he decided that he needed a distraction, before he killed himself or someone else. So, he simply walked out the door with the intent to find something to distract him. As he was running along the forest floor, he heard a loud growl coming from his left. The gas-masked boy turned to see a large bear baring its teeth at him. He snarled back and pulled out 2 plain kunai, foregoing his usual poisoned blades. After a brief tussle with the beast, Naruto managed to cut the bear up so much that it finally collapsed from blood loss. The boy was thoroughly soaked in the red liquid and his suit appeared to be completely crimson. He wiped blood-splattered fingers over his eyepieces to try and clear them, but only managed to smudge them even worse. He chuckled and flopped down on the ground. "I don't remember a fight ever being so fun." His smile took on a more psychotic appearance. I don't even remember why I was angry." His body shook as he chuckled some more and got up to search for more prey. It was strange, but he now realized that his was mind crystal clear when he was dueling to the death. It seemed like battle helped him focus. Even back when he was getting attacked by the Anbu, he was relatively calm. The power to end the existence of another living being was something he found disturbingly soothing. After spending hours in the forest, massacring everything he could find, he could finally think again. He could put his mind in order again, to logically go over what he needed to do that day. It was a glorious feeling. There was something about ending a life in combat. The life or death fight between combatants that sharpened his focus and wiped away all the clutter in his mind. He could finally sleep, at least for a little while. A few days later, Anko returned and quickly noticed that Naruto was leaving at random times and coming back much later smelling of blood each time. She knew that he sometimes trained by attacking things in the forest, and often sold the pelts for money, but something was off though. She even tried to stop him one time and ask where he was going, but he became very irritable. After following him, she witnessed his brutal and seemingly psychotic episodes of killing. These were not normal fights. He would make it last and draw out the agonizing death of the beasts. As soon as he got back, she grabbed him and shunshed him to the Hokage's office, where Anko explained what she saw. That started a back-and-forth argument between Naruto and the Hokage. The Hokage stated that it wasn't good for him to be spending hours in the forest alone, and that they thought he would get injured. Naruto argued that he had been doing the same thing for years, just now he was no longer doing it to collect the furs of animals. The aged ninja declared that it wasn't good for his mental health to be killing so much at his age, even if it was just animals and insects. Naruto countered with his knowledge of shinobi and the fact that killing was part of being a shinobi. Sarutobi finally put his foot down and gave him an ultimatum: see a psychiatrist for the next 6 months, or be barred from practicing in the forest alone. Naruto instantly went with the second option, since he hated the idea of having to go every week to see someone who would probe his brain. The Hokage let him know that if he was found to be breaking his promise, he would be relocated and barred from the Forest of Death completely. On top of that, attending therapy sessions would be mandatory for the next year. Given no say in the matter, Naruto begrudgingly agreed. For the few days following he seemed to be okay. The boy wondered if maybe, just maybe he might not need his hobby, after all. What had happened had left a deep scar on his mind though, and soon enough his insomnia set back in and his focus dropped back to zero. Naruto realized that he needed to kill, and that this time, Anko and the Hokage were wrong. One night he quietly crept out of his home again. One would think that Anko could catch him, but over his life he had become somewhat of an expert at hiding and creeping about unnoticed. He had always been good, since he had been living on the streets, and now training with Anko had increased his expertise tenfold. He was but a shadow to those around him. He shivered in anticipation as he jumped from branch to branch. His mouth twisted into a smile and he chuckled with bizarre mirth. He stopped on a random branch and looked down at the forest floor. His eyes scanned the ground, and after a few seconds he spotted a large bear about the size of a carriage wandering around searching for food. He pulled out a kunai with his left hand and raised it in front of him. It's just such a simple process, he mused. Just a little pressure and a sharp edge. Just those two things and I can cut flesh and rupture organs. Such a deceivingly easy process. He then began to focus on turning the air around the bear into a dense fog. After a few seconds, he could no longer see the ground 40 feet below him, but he could feel everything. After a deep breath, he took the plunge. Omake. The day without his mask. Naruto was wandering around in Konoha in the early morning. He was bored. There was no class today, Anko was out on a mission, and he just didn't feel like training today. As he walked, he noticed some of the shops opening, and then something clicked in his mind. With this mask, I haven't been able to smell practically anything at all in the past few years. The only time I take it off is to shower or quickly scarf some food down. Come to think of it, I kind of miss the smells of the city and the forest. It was then that he knew his plan for the day. Scampering home, he removed his mask and began to suck in air through his nose. He noted his own room smelled of the tang of metal, the bitter stench of poisonous fluids, and an earthy tone that reminded him of the woods. He also noted a hint of blood seemed to permeate his clothing but shrugged that off as expected. As soon as he left his room he was hit with a barrage of new smells, some he recognized, and others seemed foreign. He sniffed his way into the kitchen and began to inhale the air surrounding various cabinets full of food. "Aw man, I've been missing out on a lot," he thought with glee as he grabbed some bacon and threw it in a pan to cook. After a few seconds the delicious smell of the meat filled his nostrils, and he was sure he was in heaven. After clearing the house out of bacon, he decided to leave to see what else he could smell. As he went into the hallway, another smell caught his nose. "Wow, that smells good. What is it though?" he pondered as he used his nose to find the source. He then noticed it was emanating from Anko's room. Looking around to make sure there was no one there, paranoid much, he slowly approached the door. Grabbing the handle, he cracked it open. The scent hit him full force, and he smiled dreamily. Sucking in as much of the aroma as he could, he contemplated what it was. "Makes me think of flowers. And maybe a dash of apple too? Does Anko have candles in here? Or is it something else? Whatever it is, I like it." He considered simply standing at the doorway all day, taking in this glorious fragrance, but decided that there was a whole village of smells that he could find. Closing the door, he quickly put up a henge. To the untrained eye he was now a completely nondescript average citizen. As he traveled through the forest, he was nearly suffocated with the new aroma. It was a satisfying smell in his opinion. The flavor of the trees and other plant life, if perhaps a little overbearing to his nose. After 30 minutes of traveling he jumped over the huge fence and made his way to the market district. As he walked, he tried to pick up as many smells as he could. First, he passed a blacksmith, and his nostrils were filled with the odor of burning coal and liquid metal. It wasn't pleasant in his mind, so he kept moving forwards. Soon he came to the farmers and restaurant district. People gave him weird looks as he passed, sniffing the whole way, but he didn't care. He was able to exercise his nose once again and was thoroughly enjoying himself. He went inside a bakery momentarily and took in the heavenly smell of freshly baked bread. He stood there for a minute or so just taking it in, before he decided there was so much more he could smell. Many hours later, Naruto was still sniffing his way around Konoha. This day made him truly question if he wanted to use the mask after all, since he was clearly missing out on so much. As he was walking along, he had the urge to use the restroom, so he headed to the nearest restaurant and went inside. As soon as he opened the bathroom door, he was nearly bowled over by the stench that came from inside the room. He covered his nose and bolted out of the building. He stopped on the side of the road and put his hand on the wall. He bent over and attempted to hold back his bile. That was awful. I don't remember bathrooms smelling that bad. He cringed as he thought about it again. I think I can hold it for a while and wait till I get home. He shook his head and stood back up and walked away. The boy tried his best to forget about the disgusting odor, but it stuck with him. He was so distracted that he wasn't looking where he was going and got shoved into a nearby alley by accident. He stumbled briefly, then caught himself and looked around. The unfortunate lad was hit full force by an awful aroma coming from a nearby dumpster, and this time the bile could not be held back. Dear God, what did they put in there? Rotting animals? He thought as he wiped his mouth off and ran out of the alleyway. Eyes bleary, he looked around and noticed that it was starting to get dark. Taking stock, the boy realized he was tired from a day of smelling all that Konoha had to offer. He began to jog towards his destination, but to get there he had to go through an area that was known for its bars. As he went, he couldn't stop the pungent aroma of alcohol from filling his nostrils. Face scrunched up in disgust, the disguised academy student considered sprinting home immediately, but was offered a brief respite when he passed a local flower shop. He smiled, thinking he had found sanctuary, but oh how he was wrong. As soon as he slowed to take it in, his nose started to itch. Achoo. He wiped his nose and then sneezed again. Achoo. His sneezing was so violent that it was scaring people on the street. His face became red and his eyes became watery as he continued to sneeze. It's becoming nearly impossible to maintain the henge. I've got to get out of here. After 20 minutes of record-setting sprinting, he was finally home. He ran to his room and slammed the door, as if the pollen and stench would chase him inside. He dashed over to where he had set down his mask and grabbed it. After strapping on the protective headgear, there was an audible sigh of relief. Never again, he vowed. The next day in class, Naruto was sitting with his head in his hand as the teacher droned on. Then he noticed the other students around him appeared to be repulsed by something. "Aw man, Choji!" Kiba exclaimed. "Eewww." Some of the girls cried out. Naruto's mouth contorted into a smirk, and then a full-blown smile. "I love my mask."
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.